I'll call JR. So bad. Yeah, I guess he's hard to find, right?
It's through the corridor and right to the left.
you doing? What's that? I don't know.
It was strange being over there. It was
But a
strange.
lot of the network jacks and things we need are on that side, so we're gonna have to fix them for the new Congress, so.
Okay, so,
You're up here, ma'am.
oh,
Right here. Oh, awesome, thank you.
all right.
No, I'm still, I'm full-time now. So I start full-time in May. Yeah, that's awesome, yeah. I'm really excited for the hearing. Well, we have an AC room over across
So we're back. So yes, so they flipped it again.
I'm down here. Good.
Crossing over your territory. I will. Good.
questions in the hearing packet for you.
Y'all ready? Okay. The hearing of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability will come to order. I want to welcome everyone here today. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Welcome to today's hearing of the United States Postal Service. I want to thank you, Postmaster General DeJoy, for appearing before the committee today. And I also want to thank Post Service Inspector General Tammy Hull for being here as well. It has been 3.5 years since Postmaster General DeJoy issued the Delivering America Plan, and 2.5 years since the Postal Service Reform Act was signed into law. This law may have eased the way for the Postal Service to reform its business model, but it left the details to Mr. DeJoy. Mr. DeJoy has withstood terrible character attacks by Democrats, to include demanding he be tried for treason. I give Mr. DeJoy credit for delivering a plan to fix the Postal Service. Time and space have been provided for him to carry out this work. The difficulty of this task has never been underestimated, as it involves completely transforming the U.S. Postal Service into a modern enterprise. This transformation requires competing with some of the most innovative companies on the planet while fulfilling the universal service obligation to deliver the mail, which is a financial challenge. And Mr. DeJoy started with an organization that had been allowed to fall into disrepair. And I don't think I need to remind anyone in the committee about the disrepair the Postal Service was in prior to Mr. DeJoy's appointment as Postmaster General, because this committee has legislative jurisdiction over the Postal Service, and we had many hearings where former Chairman Elijah Cummings and then subcommittee ranking member Mark Meadows joined together in publicly criticizing Mr. DeJoy's predecessor for never even coming up with a plan to reform the post office. However, the Postal Service's financial solvency today continues to be a major concern. The Postal Service is hemorrhaging red ink. This year's loss was almost $10 billion. Next year's loss is projected to be $6.5 billion. And with each loss comes an explanation of how much it was, how much of it was out of your control. Inflation caused by President Biden's out-of-control government spending is one factor, but it's not the only factor. When you predicted the Postal Service could break even, did you not foresee some of these other issues? This includes the civil service retirement obligations, which may be as much as $14 billion. In Mr. DeJoy's testimony, you stated, sir, how you often have been burdened with excessive oversight, to include letters from Congress. Believe me, nobody is more aware than I am of the concerns and frustration about the Postal Service from members of Congress than me. I can't walk down the hall without one of the 434 colleagues of mine giving me a Postal Service horror story. But it comes with the territory. And while this committee is charged with oversight of the Postal Service at an operational level, we are all members representing our constituents. And the people of Western Kentucky have not been immune to problems that seem to stem from efforts to change postal operation. For example, in Crittenden County, Kentucky, the Postal Service was delivering bills after they were due. And after being told the county of Crittenden was the problem, it turned out the problem lay with the Postal Service. And as the postal network changes, large amounts of mail from Western Kentucky sat in Louisville before finally being sent to Nashville to be sorted. When problems like this occur, members are going to continue to reach out to the Postal Service, just as I did. There are positive signs, such as increased revenue and reduced work hours, but we're eager to hear where all this is going. And there are things that Mr. DeJoy is trying to do in-house that would be better left to the private sector. The Postal Service has added over 100,000 career employees, but personnel costs and retirement expenses are huge liabilities. This isn't going to work unless we look for ways to do more with fewer people. That's what the theme of this last election, and I think the theme of this new administration is going to be how to make government more efficient. We must also address election mail and ballot delivery. We appreciate the effort of Mr. DeJoy and your employees in delivering election mail and ballots during this year's election cycle, as you have done in every cycle since you've been Postmaster General. But the job to get mail and packages from point A to point B, and it's not to serve as de facto election authority. And while the Postal Service gains revenue delivering election mail, it also creates an immense burden, not just in terms of resources, but also reputational risk. This committee and then the House recently passed legislation requiring barcoding on ballots. That was sponsored by Ms. Porter from California, our Democrat colleague. This bill will add much needed but not complete transparency to ballots as they travel through a portion of the postal network. But when extraordinary measures kick in, there's a gaping hole as ballots are no longer scanned regardless of whether they have a barcode. And in California, for example, ballots can be accepted long past Election Day as long as they're postmarked. It leaves postal employees in the position of applying this postmark. To me, there's too much room for bad behavior in that scenario, or the accusation of bad behavior. This issue must be closely examined moving forward, particularly in considering the patchwork quilt of election laws across the thousands of election authorities. Some of these election laws impose absurd expectations on the Postal Service. For example, allowing voters to request a ballot that comes from a printer across the country the day before the election. That's just not feasible. In closing, we know the Postal Service has a job to do, but so do we in Congress. We need you, Mr. DeJoy, to answer our questions and give us reason to believe things will turn around at the Postal Service, which is something that I think this committee hopes for in a bipartisan manner. With that, I now yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. DeJoy and Ms. Hull, for joining us here today to discuss the state of the U.S. Postal Service. When the Continental Congress established it, it was more than just a horseback-driven system for sending personal letters. The Post Office created the communications network that made the committees of correspondence possible, that integrated the strategies of military commanders with public servants, and that established the National Postal Roads Transportation Network. The Post Office also promoted the free press by ensuring the very low-cost distribution of news to the public at special rates. A luminary no less striking than Benjamin Franklin, the inventor of the electric lightning rod, the lending library, the volunteer fire department, and the bifocals, became the first Postmaster General to improve delivery routes and to speed up service to connect the new nation. 249 years later, the Postal Service is still an essential institution for Americans. Its mission is set forth in the Constitution. It's laid out in specifics in federal code, which charges the Postal Service with providing prompt, reliable, and efficient services to patrons in all areas and shall render postal service to all communities. During COVID, the Postal Service was ranked America's most essential institution. People rely on the Postal Service to transact critical business, including bank statements and legal notices, life-saving prescription medicines, and notifications of data breaches. The Postal Service can reach every address in America, 167 million residences, businesses, and P.O. boxes. Its value is essential to the economy and the society, especially to people who live in the most hard-to-reach rural places. Efficiency, reliability, and stability are critical to meeting the needs of the public and required for ensuring the long-term survival and adaptability of the Post Office. The Postal Service has been operating in an unsustainable manner for a long time. When President Trump named Postmaster DeJoy in 2020, the Postal Service was then in need of reform. In response, Postmaster DeJoy launched the 10-year Delivering for America plan. He has stated repeatedly that the Postal Service, quote, must operate in many ways like a private business. Of course, some private businesses succeed and others go bankrupt. Congress passed the bipartisan Postal Service Reform Act in 2022. This helped the Postal Service avoid imminent financial collapse and gave Postmaster DeJoy runway to implement his plan for success. The law helped the Postal Service progress towards graduating from the GAO's high-risk list, which ranks government operations most vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse, and getting off that list is indeed hard to accomplish. Despite all these bipartisan efforts, it seems that Postmaster DeJoy has failed to use all of this new discretion and resources effectively. His changes to the delivery network have resulted in a disastrous decline in on-time delivery in many regions of the country. And we members of Congress hear about it all the time from our constituents, the lost paychecks, the bills that go unpaid because they're never delivered, the business chaos, the personal disruptions. Bipartisan concerns now about DeJoy's plan changes prompted a delay in the activation of mail processing and delivery hubs through the end of the election and holiday season. The Postmaster General anticipated that these delays would be temporary and all in service of getting the Postal Service to break even financially. 3 years into his plan, however, the financial condition of the Postal Service is astoundingly bad and much worse than all of his initial projections. Postmaster DeJoy projected in his original Delivering for America plan that the Postal Service would reach break even by 2023 or 2024. Instead, the Postal Service's net loss of $950 million from operations in FY 2022 increased to a whopping $9.5 billion net loss in FY 2024. That's a 900% increase in the Postal Service's losses in a 2-year time span. Postmaster DeJoy's Delivering for America plan changed delivery standards for first-class mail from 2 to 3 days to 3 to 5 days. Mr. DeJoy claimed that the new standards would make it possible for the Postal Service to reach its 95% on-time mail delivery goals nationwide. Yet today, not a single one of the 50 Postal Service districts in the United States is meeting the Postal Service's self-designed 95% service standard. Meanwhile, the Postal Service increased prices for mail and packages in July. Another price increase for packages will go into effect incredibly in January of next year. In other words, under Mr. DeJoy's leadership, Americans are paying higher prices for worse service. More than 3 years into Delivering for America's implementation, with more than 150 ongoing projects initiated to meet the Postmaster's goals, customers are still seeing a decline in mail delivery service, and they're paying higher costs for it. The Postmaster General's plan isn't working, but Mr. DeJoy continues to drive everything in the wrong direction. In the last month, the Postal Service announced its intention to lower service performance targets for FY 2025 by as much as 15% among certain first-class mail products, the lowest performance targets ever, excluding the COVID-19 period. Mr. DeJoy's leadership of the Postal Service is an alarming example of what we may see coming in the next term, sticking to the mega playbook of treating essential government functions with cavalier recklessness and ignoring the differences between a private sector company and a public good. I do want to take a moment to recognize and applaud the valiant efforts of postal management and employees to deliver election mail during the 2024 election season. I also want to commend Inspector General Hall for the office's exceptional audit work during the election season to ensure the Postal Service had ample resources and insights to promptly deliver election mail and make adjustments where necessary. When the Postal Service meets its mission, America benefits. And my colleagues and I all want the Post Office to work for our constituents and our communities. As the Postal Service works to build a resilient operation, it must fulfill its obligations to the people and ensure that we all have reliable mail delivery as a pillar of a successful American economy and society. I look forward to today's interaction, and I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Ranking member yields back. Today, we're joined by the Honorable Louis DeJoy, who has served as Postmaster General of the United States Postal Service since May of 2020. I'd also like to welcome Tammy Hull, Inspector General of the United States Postal Service, Office of Inspector General, a role she has held since November of 2018. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative, and thank you all. You may take a seat. Before we begin with opening statements, I ask unanimous consent for Representatives Clyde and McCormick of Georgia and Representative Budzinski of Illinois be waived on to the committee for today's hearing for the purpose of asking questions. Without objection, so ordered. We appreciate you all being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statement and will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we ask that you please begin to wrap up. I now recognize Postmaster General Louis DeJoy for his opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to once again discuss the significant progress the U.S. Postal Service is making in accomplishing the objectives identified in the Delivering for America plan. When I agreed to take the role of Postmaster General, the nation was in the beginning of a pandemic, and the Postal Service was in an organizational crisis, facing a diverse array of challenges that put the organization on an accelerating and near-term trajectory to financial and service collapse. The Postal Service had lost almost $90 billion, was projected to lose another $200 billion over the next 10 years, and was about to run out of cash before year-end. Over 31,000 facilities were in shockingly horrible condition, with over $20 billion in deferred maintenance, and were ill-equipped for modern-day tasks. We had not met our service standards in almost 10 years, had not reduced work hours in over 8 years, despite significantly reduced volume. More explicitly, over 57% of our 31,000 post offices did not cover the cost of the people that worked at them, and 76% of our 235,000 delivery routes lost money. This all came to a crushing blow in peak holiday season of 2020, 3.5 months into my tenure, when we were overwhelmed and dramatically impacted service throughout the nation for many months. Service scores across the board sank into the 70s for an extended period of time. We were a dysfunctional organization with poor operational processes and discipline, declining product volumes, and alarming employment practices. We were void of strategy, vision, and resources. Yet, as with today, we were high on demands, regulation, critique, and resistance to change. Oddly enough, there wasn't a plan in sight at that particular point in time, anywhere from anyone to address the issues, even though it was going on for over a decade. Within 4 months of my tenure, we produced the Delivering for America plan, a plan that called for the men and women of the United States Postal Service to raise the organization up from near death and pursue operational, financial, and service excellence. And we have been executing on that plan since, through extraordinary times. The 10-year DFA plan had 5 simple aspirational and directional objectives we planned to accomplish. The plan was developed in consideration of the laws and regulations that governed the Postal Service at the time, not the ones we think that should have governed it. The plan also considered the failing condition and trajectory of the organization, as well as its revenue losses and opportunities at the time of the release of the plan in March of 2021. Finally, the plan, when developed and as it is being implemented, considered the relevant attributes of our evolving economy, geography, public policy, marketplace, and competitive landscape as we knew it. The plan's 5 objectives were focused on the following. Objective number 1, improve our operational precision and organizational effectiveness. We have. After much reorganization and sweeping operational infrastructure initiatives, we have made great gains towards replicating throughout the Postal Service the ingenuity and competitive spirit of the best in private companies in America. The change in culture, combined with our commitment to public service, will serve us well into the future. Objective number 2, reducing our cost of performance. We have. Reversing our loss trajectory by reducing 45 million annual work hours, approximately $2.5 billion, and transportation costs of over $1.5 billion annually, thus reaching the self-help goal, cost takeout goal of $30 billion over the 10-year period identified in the plan. Objective number 3, creating reliable and affordable service. We have. By September of 2023, service for most product categories reached 93% on time and were well in reach of our stated goals of 95%. And we still had some of the lowest postage rates in the world. However, the cost to achieve this under the existing infrastructure and service standards was not sustainable. Objective number 4, growing our revenue and margin on our products. We have. Revenue growth has exceeded our plan by over $24 billion, with significant gains in competitive products dramatically outpacing the projections in the DFA plan. Objective number 5, creating inspired, productive, and long-term career paths for our employees. We have, by reversing unfavorable practices with our pre-career workforce, improving our working conditions, and liberating and inspiring the managerial workforce to collaborate and simply do better. In addition to all these initiatives and accomplishments, there was another goal of which you are aware, Mr. Chair. Under your leadership and with former Chair Carolyn Maloney, as well as with Chairman Peters and former Ranking Member Portman in the Senate, we worked very collaboratively on the passage of the Postal Service Reform Act, which, among other things, removed the unfair burden of prepayments required and enabled the integration of our retiree health care benefits with the Medicare system. Again, thank you and the Congress for your efforts in this important legislation. After 3 years, we are a different organization today. We have initiated reforms in nearly every aspect of the Postal Service, including operations, maintenance, logistics, procurement, sales, marketing, technology, products, government relations, communications, and personnel management. We have repurposed or repurposed approximately 200 facilities, deployed $2.5 billion towards deferred maintenance, hired or repositioned almost 1 million people, relocated or installed over 1,000 conveyor systems, transitioned one of the world's largest air cargo networks, packaged and delivered over 1 billion COVID test kits, and introduced a new multi-billion-dollar product. We did all this while delivering 400 million pieces of mail daily, 6 days a week, to 167 million addresses spread across half the planet under rules, regulations, and processes designed by bureaucrats of the 1970s for a different social and economic America. I am proud of the work we have accomplished and am impressed by the commitment, talent, and tenacity of our people as they work hard to make the Postal Service the best in commerce and public service for many years to come, a unique opportunity we have and as the Congress intended when they created us. What we haven't done, Mr. Chair, is break even. The planned initiatives accomplished did not overcome the rescue and recovery of our operations, the 20% inflation we experienced, as well as the dramatic rise in our mismanaged federal government retirement costs and other compensation benefits. About 90% of our 2023 loss of $6.5 billion was due to this substantial, unplanned, unable to be forecasted increases in our costs in these areas. Nevertheless, under these conditions, we still reduced our projected 10-year losses from approximately $200 billion to slightly under $80 billion. We are now taking additional aggressive actions to further reduce our operating costs by $5 billion annually and grow our revenue an additional $3 billion annually, as identified in my letter to the President and congressional leadership on January 10, 2024. These initiatives are aligned with the requirements spelled out in the Postal Reform Act to deliver mail and packages 6 days a week through an integrated network. This requires the continued realignment and equipping of over 31,000 facilities, the rerouting of over 50,000 truckloads a day, the effective utilization of over 200 aircraft routes a day, and inspiring and changing the operational and organizational culture of over 600,000 postal employees. I am confident in our ability to accomplish all this. It will also require a change to our service standards and business rules to reflect the modern-day use of the Postal Service and to continue to liberate us from the reckless demands and regulation and mindset that has destroyed this organization over the past 19 years. The American people mailed 59 billion pieces of first-class mail in 1999. Last year, they mailed less than 12 billion. It is time for us to solve for the obvious, and that is what we propose to do with our recent filing for an advisory opinion with the Postal Service Regulatory Commission. Since September of 2023, when our service was in the 90s, the rapid changes we have had to make have not come without consequence in some areas of the nation, and we apologize to those impacted. This is the consequence of decades of neglect and inaction. The lift we have is high, and the time we have is little. So we will carry on with caution, but we will carry on. Having said that, throughout the coming year, we continue to deliver more than 50% of the mail and packages we handle each day in advance of the current service standard. We estimate we will deliver 85% on the day of the service standard, and 95% will be delivered within 1 day of the service requirement. On average, the American public will receive their mail and packages within 2.7 days. As you know, the basic mission of the Postal Service and our fundamental statutory obligation is to provide high-quality postal services in a financially sustainable manner. Under this structure, it is my job not just to deliver the mail tomorrow, but to transform the Postal Service into an organization that can provide quality postal services in a financially sustainable manner for years to come. We are working feverishly to correct for the past, overcome the economic, political, and competitive hurdles we face today, and yes, correct for our own missteps as we engage in this massive task. I ask you to keep in mind that there is no way to fix service and our finances under the current regulatory business model without dramatic changes to our operations and approach. And then I would like to remind the committee that I was not appointed by President Trump. I was appointed by a bipartisan Board of Governors. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Inspector General Hall.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to discuss our work. I'm proud of the work my office completed this year to promote accountability, integrity, and transparency in the United States Postal Service. We conducted extensive field work around the 2024 election from late September through the week of the election, making more than 1,000 visits to processing plants and delivery units in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. We reported issues our teams found in near real time to Postal Service management, and we followed up with weekly reporting to postal executives, the Board of Governors, and to committee staff. Overall, the Postal Service was very responsive, and this collaboration supported a successful election cycle. We will issue a report summarizing our findings in the spring. Beyond the election, we have continued to promote transparency and accountability through our audits of the Delivering for America plan and the Postal Service's response to mail theft. We've also fought fraud and abuse through our investigations, finding and arresting postal employees and outsiders who collaborate to steal checks, credit cards, and use the postal network to traffic narcotics. Our data indicates that we have thousands of actionable criminal complaints for which we have insufficient resources to investigate. To continue our critical oversight for the American public, we need a budget that keeps pace with inflation and grows when needed to address serious risks. We appreciate your continued support in this area. Next week, we plan to issue a report on the early impacts of the Postal Service's transportation optimization effort that alters when collection mail is picked up at certain post offices. Our report will identify service reductions that resulted in the communities where the changes occurred. Consistent with our previous work, this report will note the critical need for increased transparency around these operational changes and their expected impacts. We believe the Postal Service needs to significantly improve communications with the affected communities so that the American public has accurate information about the changes they will experience and the service levels they should expect. Earlier this year, we reported similar concerns in our work on the implementation of the Delivering for America plan. It is important that the Postal Service keep communities and employees informed as changes are made. This is especially important when these impacts occur in underserved rural parts of America that have limited options and rely most heavily on the Postal Service. Cost-cutting to achieve break-even performance can result in disparate impacts to these communities. Accurate, timely, and transparent information about how plan changes will impact these communities is critical to preserve trust in America's Postal Service. While these initiatives roll out, financial challenges for the Postal Service continue. Our work has identified the need for the Postal Service to provide updated financial information as it implements its plans. The Delivering for America 2.0 update did not include projections on whether or when the changes will lead to break-even results. These financial projections are essential for key decision makers to better understand the trade-offs the Postal Service is making, especially as it advocates for legislative changes to its pension and workers' compensation programs. Our recent work discusses how these programs are costly obligations, and it would be helpful for all stakeholders to better understand what it will take for the Postal Service to be financially solvent. While the Postal Service has not provided updated long-term financial projections, it has provided some cost savings estimates associated with specific parts of its plan. Our future work will provide oversight assessing whether it fully realizes these projected savings. We at the OIG are committed to our efforts to provide transparency and promote accountability for service performance and financial solvency. America needs a strong postal service, and the Postal Service owes clarity to the communities it serves about its plans and their projected impacts. I appreciate the time to discuss these issues and your support. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
We'll begin our questions. Chair now recognizes Dr. Fox from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank both of our witnesses for being here. I think my colleagues on both sides have done a good job of expressing our concerns about the status of reforms and performance of the post office. Mr. DeJoy, as you know, my district and many areas across the southeastern United States were hit hard by Hurricane Helene at the end of September. The storm brought catastrophic flooding and widespread damage that did not spare postal facilities in its path. Can you tell me how many post offices in North Carolina remain closed and how many have been reopened? And if you don't have the answer readily, it's okay if you give it to me later. And how long do you expect the closed post offices to remain closed?
Thank you, Congresswoman Fox. I believe we have about 10 post offices now that still are without service. We have mobile mobile units that we have put in place. I will tell you that when the hurricane hit, we lost about 30 post offices, and we're down not able to get to about 3 million delivery points, and subsequently progressed down to about 20,000 right now that are closed.
You put on your mic.
If I may, we've had a couple of people, and myself included, having a little trouble hearing you all. If you could pull the mics closer and speak into the microphone, that would help. Thank you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Fox.
That's okay. I want to go on to another local issue. The Fleetwood, North Carolina Post Office, very small facility and fast-growing community, is too small for the mail volume it receives. And we understand many of the Fleetwood routes are run out of the Boone Post Office nearly 18 miles away, which is delaying the delivery of mail and costs mail carriers time and the UPS money. My staff was told the Fleetwood Post Office could not be moved to a larger facility, although one is available, unless a disaster struck the post office. Well, it was destroyed by flooding. Can we now expect the Fleetwood Post Office to be moved or rebuilt as a larger facility so that the long and wasteful transfer of mail to and from the Boone Post Office can be eliminated? It's been a constant source of frustration for many of my constituents, and I'm going to follow up on this, Mr. DeJoy, because I have other questions to ask you. You stated a few years ago your goal was for the Postal Service to break even by 2023. However, as we've heard today, the USPS continues to lose money each year and is on track to close this year with a $9.5 billion loss. Is the Delivering for America plan still up to the task of helping the Postal Service finally break even?
Look, we just issued Delivery for America 2.0, which is just reinforcement of the initiatives that we have to improve operational performance, recognize the diminishing mail volumes that we are handling in the marketplace, and reclaiming our position in the package business. So I'll drive to reduce cost, grow revenue, so we can put more product into our carriers' bags, which have to go to 161 million addresses 6 days a week, which by law, okay, which is over half our cost, which is a pretty fixed environment. So we are pursuing these initiatives. We have introduced new products that have grown package revenue significantly, and have other products coming down the line once we get the network in order and the changes in the service standards that we need. So absent other extraordinary issues that face us, this is the best plan that I've seen around town in a long time. We will get $5 billion out of additional cost, and we will grow our revenue by additional $3 billion. And if the OIG wants to put a forecast in as to when we will break even, she has those numbers, she can do it.
Thank you, Mr. DeJoy. Yeah, I use the post office a lot. I send out a lot of mail every week from my office, from me personally. So I'm very acutely aware of the service, the time, and the cost. At what point do increases in postage rates start destroying demand and decrease the volume of mail to economically unsustainable levels? And you've said you're going to raise postage rates to the extent possible. How do you determine what constitutes, quote, the extent possible?
So we have operated under a defective pricing model for 15 years before my time. Mail volume had cut in half. The PAEA froze prices to inflation, and the mail volume got cut in half, and we were not allowed to raise our prices to the tune of $50 billion that the organization was not able to raise their prices. When I got here, we finally got the approval to raise prices, and we had 20% inflation, of which I get to charge prices after we incur the inflation. I'm always in arrears. 75% of the price increases that we charge were due to inflation and were not at the inflation rate. An organization like ours, which has labor and physical distribution assets, that would have been negligent not to do any price increases, especially after 50 years. We are trying to reduce our costs significantly, okay, and grow our revenue to create an integrated mail and package network that winds up funding the delivery of mail into rural communities like yours. Okay? That is the strategy we're working on.
Thank you, Mr.
right now.
DeJoy. I'm way over time. I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. DeJoy, your plan promised Americans excellence in delivery, but the Postal Service is now operating below its 95% target service standard nationwide in every single one of the 50 postal districts in America. The service performance in my state of Maryland for first-class mail has remained significantly below the national average, which is 89%. Maryland has not met the 95% service standard for at least 2 years. Given that you've not been able to meet the current target service standards, your new proposal to the Board of Governors is not to work to improve service, to bring it up to par, as I understand it, but instead to lower the service standards further, especially in rural areas. Do I have that right? Is this your approach to dealing with this problem?
I disagree with the premise, and it's not the approach. The approach, 85%, 90% of mail and packages originate within 50 miles of the sites that we are talking about for collecting and distributing originating mail. Okay, all of that service into rural communities will be advanced. Okay, we're talking about single-piece first-class mail collected from these rural areas outside of 50 miles, which is not only rural areas. There's also about half the volume is urban areas outside of 50 miles of these plants, and half the volume is in rural areas. May get a day less within the 5-day window. Everything else will get accelerated. They'll still get their medications, which come in packages. They'll still get their other types of mail that come from shippers of products and so forth.
Okay, but just to be clear, it's as if somebody's getting a poor grade, and rather than trying to figure out how to improve their performance, it's changing the grading standard. Is that right?
I disagree with the premise. I get myself a good grade. Okay.
Well, I'm just going by the numbers that exist. I mean, isn't it the case that in all 50 postal districts, you have not lived up to the 95%?
First of all,
service standard?
95% never had a target date, right? We never had it's a 10-year plan, sir. It was 25 years of destruction. It's a 10-year plan. Okay, right now, as I said, 50% of first-class mail, of market-dominant mail gets delivered a day in advance, 85% on time, 95% within 3 days, which is better than the service was when I got here, and we are making dramatic change. We've moved 1 million people around the nation. We've opened up 200 different facilities, right?
All right, I appreciate all of that. Ms. Hall, let me come to you. Help me figure this out. Is the Delivering for America plan actually improving timeliness and reliability of service delivery for Americans?
We haven't seen that so far. This past year, there have been significant network changes in our work in particularly in Atlanta and Richmond. Saw some significant service degradations when those network changes were implemented, and also in the introduction of some of the transportation optimization, local transportation optimization in Richmond, and what we're seeing now in some of the other areas, service has declined in those locations.
Okay, Mr. DeJoy, you said the Postal Service would break even by 2023, last year, or 2024. We're in December now. Under your leadership, the Postal Service has increased the deficit by 900%. Do you still realistically expect the Postal Service to break even this year or next year, or when will it break even?
I expect to drive $5 billion of cost out over the next 24 months and grow revenue $3 to $4 billion over the next 24 months. I intend to try and negotiate with someone on our retirement plan benefits and how they get calculated and how they get invested. We just filed for with OPM to look at how we've had like a 700% increase in terms of people that will be on the plan that is inaccurate. We have investment issues. We have workman's comp issues. But these are things that most of them will take actions from this Congress. I can't do this myself. But what I can do, we are doing. We're going to drive out costs. We're going to grow revenue. And this is why we did not put a forecast in for when the break even was, because it's not something we can do ourselves. All agencies don't put in how they're going to use it, if they're going to break their budget or not. We put it in at that particular point in time for a variety of reasons, but we're working to drive out costs and grow revenue.
So do you regret now having set that break-even point at 2023 or 2024 when you first set this out?
So there's a lot of things I regret sitting here, okay? I was here 3.5 months. I had projections. I had an understanding of what the operation was and should have been doing, right? I had a board. We sat down and we put something together that said something that lost $100 billion over the last 10 years, right? And was more broke than one could even imagine. Okay, we put a number together and we went for it, and we got a lot done, and we're still getting a lot done.
Okay, and can you break even without Congress's help? Are you saying you need Congress's help to do it now?
I think it's good. Next year, I'll have 600,000 people on my payroll, maybe 610. I'll have 720,000 on my retirement plan. That's a problem.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're saying you need Congress's help in order to break even?
I could continue to unwind service, right? I'm telling you what I can get in terms of cost. If, in fact, we get all those costs and we have reasonable inflation and we have reasonable calculations of our workman's comp costs and we have reasonable calculations of our retirement benefits, we have a chance. I have a date and time and projection. But if I say that becomes the whole discussion. What we didn't get accomplished, not what we got accomplished. So I'm a little wiser being here in Washington for 4 years now.
Okay. Gentlemen,
Thanks.
time's expired. Chair recognizes Mr. Groffman from Wisconsin.
Thank you. Always great to talk about the Postal Service. Used to collect stamps. Just to give you a little little history. The last 3 cent stamp was in 1958, the Mackinac Bridge stamp. So there you are. Now, you said that your first-class stamps are lower than other countries. I wasn't aware of that. Could you give us a little story as to where the first-class stamp is today in, say, Canada or Mexico or the UK?
UK is about $2. $2 for a stamp. Paris, Europe's in the $2 range, $1.50. I'm sorry.
What's Canada and Mexico?
I don't know. I have a. I can get you a chart, but we're at the bottom. We're down with Ecuador and countries like that. Most of the industrial world is in the $1.50 plus range.
Okay. Overall, well, next question. Are there any requirements with regard to electric vehicles for the post office?
There's we have a plan to deploy electric vehicles. We have a commitment to buy, we have a plan to buy 106,000 vehicles over the next 5 years, of which 66,000 will be electric. This year, we took in 28,000 vehicles, of which 22,000 vehicles were gas vehicles. Next year, it'll be about 50-50, and then the following year on the acquisitions we have will be.
Do you have any statistics as far as the cost of gas versus electric?
Well, Congressman, I was in the crossfire of a whole bunch of issues and did not agree to put electric vehicles into our fleet until we had the appropriate cost benefits to the organization. The IRA program, which was approved by this Congress, gave us $1.9 billion for infrastructure cost and gave us $1.2 billion for new vehicle costs, of which we have put together a plan that does in fact work for the Postal Service with that particular, with those particular, cost structures. We are buying, special purpose long-term vehicles that'll last us 20, 25 years at a relatively good cost with the IRA offset, and all my infrastructure will be paid for this set of vehicles coming out. We're studying the charges now as it moves forward. We have our routes are set up for this type of service. Some of these vehicles we don't have to charge for 3 days, and the cost. I believe when I look back at the cost improvements that we get, it's only when we get out to the cost of all the 10, let's say a battery lasts 10 years. There is cost benefit to us on maintenance and fuel and so forth for the 10 years. It's when you go to buy that new battery using today's battery cost that it puts us over could put us over the return.
Given your druthers, would you rather have gasoline-powered vehicles if your sole goal was to save money?
So my need was to have vehicles like now,
Yeah,
like 5 years ago.
Yeah, just straight up and down. If we wanted to save money in the next 10 years, would you feel better if we said it would be all gas?
I feel good where we are. I feel good where we are. Well,
that can't be right. It's half of each. Which is less expensive? They can't be identical. Maybe they are identical. I don't know.
Look, this is a time constraint. Once installed, the places that we're installing, we couldn't put electric vehicles everywhere, and we couldn't put electric vehicles in overnight, okay? But once installed, and if you you offset the capital costs, which we have, it's a pretty decent thing. It's a nice vehicle. We have better monitoring on it, and it's lower in maintenance.
I'll give you another question because I'm almost running out. We were talking this morning. Do you have any people in the post office which you'd refer to as DEI professionals, or people who are focused on that sort of thing, either with regard to people you hire or with regard to government contracting?
Congressman, this is a hard-working, focused, boots-on-the-ground organization. We have our normal, in terms of a plan, we have our diversity goals, but that is just handled by our basic HR department, and we are a diverse group of diverse organization, mostly focused on deliver mail and packages.
Does that affect who you hire or who you promote?
I mean, we pay it. We pay it to. You can look at my organization, and look at and see what the make your own judgment on it. But I hire and relocate people based on intensive evaluation of their performance, and I believe most of the organization does that.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, time's expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, I have written to the Postal Service many times in recent years about issues in the District of Columbia, including mail being stolen, burned, or otherwise destroyed, lost, or not delivered. Recently, I asked that the Postal Service hold a community meeting with me and my constituents in Ward 5. The Postal Service waited for weeks before responding and eventually told my office it was in the so-called black period before the election and could not hold a community meeting with an elected official, even though my request was placed weeks before the blackout period started. I then requested that the Postal Service contact the relevant stakeholders to hold the meeting without me during the blackout period. This never happened. My office has contacted the Postal Service since the end of the blackout period and still has not received a substantive response about this meeting request. So Postmaster DeJoy, will you direct the Postal Service to work with my office and hold this meeting as soon as possible?
I will immediately get into it, and most likely that will be the outcome. I need to understand what the circumstances is, but we need to do this is an organization that has a lot of complaints against it, and its people get somewhat averse to extensive communication, which is something that we're trying to change here. But we have begun going out with different congressional and state and local people and trying to amass a communication process that not only resolves problems, but also teaches the people that we're engaging with the problems and reasons as to why why we're doing things, and hopefully build some equity and understanding of the problems that we face. Despite the accusations, we do a tremendous amount of communication. Often, we're not clear enough in our communication, or people don't like the answers to what we communicate. But we will engage and embrace that, and I will personally look into your situation and get back to you in a couple of days.
Well, Mr. DeJoy and Ms. Hull, as you know, mail theft has exploded in recent years. Between 2019 and 2022, there was an 87% increase in reports of mail theft from mailboxes and a 543% increase in letter carrier robberies. An audit issued this year by the Government Accountability Office stated that the number of U.S. Postal Inspected Service investigations into serious crimes nearly doubled between 2019 and 2023, an increase driven by robberies of letter carriers. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the GAO report titled U.S. Postal Service Inspection Service should document its law enforcement workforce decision-making process.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. In the District of Columbia, my constituents are continuing to experience mail theft, including check fraud. Postal theft endangers our hardworking postal employees and our constituents who have had money stolen and are missing important packages and mail. Ms. Hull, what is the effect of the rise in mail theft on letter carriers' safety, health, and well-being?
Yeah, I think the mail theft explosion is, as you said, very concerning, and and definitely has an impact and raises issues with letter carrier safety. We also, similar to GAO, I think before the GAO report that you mentioned, we issued a report on the Postal Service's response to mail theft and are continuing to do local visits. We've done Queens, New York, we did Chicago, we've done San Francisco. Washington, D.C. may be a place where we go also to look at what the Postal Service is doing to address mail theft.
I have introduced a bill to require the U.S. Postal Service to install security cameras at each postal facility to protect USPS employees, customers, and property. The Postal Service retains its own law enforcement body, the U.S. Postal Inspector Service, that is tasked with investigating and preventing postal crime. For more than 50 years, postal police officers have been responsible for protecting postal employees, customers, and property. The Postal Service employs approximately 450 uniformed officers around the country. These officers defend the Postal Service mission around the clock, 7 days a week. It is more important now than ever that the Postal Service retain the ability to adequately investigate postal crime. All right.
Okay,
However,
go ahead.
However, in 2020, soon after Mr. DeJoy became Postal General, the Postal Service, and here I'm quoting, declared that postal police officers should no longer be assigned to investigate or prevent mail theft or protection of letter carriers, end quote, except in cases when the theft or violation occurs directly on Postal Service premises. I have co-led on legislation to reverse this directive, Ms. Hull. How does this?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, it's 2.5 minutes over, but we can submit that question about the police officer to the Inspector General, if that's okay. Is that okay? Okay. All right, we will do that, Mr. Norton, if that's okay with you. All right, thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Burchett from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, how many unions do you deal with within the Postal Service?
Directly, 7 unions and management associations.
7, all right. And tell me, what is the Delivering for America program?
What is it?
Yes, sir.
Delivering for America program is a set of strategies to try and reverse the trajectory that the Postal Service had when I arrived and bring it improve service and improve its profitability.
Okay. On your website, it says it's organization and financial and operational crisis to one that is a high-performing group. Do you believe that the plan, which was introduced 4 years ago, has made the Postal Service high-performing?
I think, sir, you after 20 years of crises, it takes a little bit of time to stabilize the organization, but I believe that this organization now is heading in that direction. I know I have experience in running and in competing with excellent organizations.
Well, there in fiscal year 24, you lost $9.5 billion.
That's right. I have lots of rules.
To do what?
I have lots of rules.
Okay, but that's $9.5 billion, though, that was lost. I think that was dramatically higher than the loss in fiscal year 23, which was just. I say just, but I'm from Tennessee. That just is not justified, because that's a heck of a lot of money to our folks. Fiscal year 2023 was $6.5 billion. How do you explain the increase if this is Delivering for America?
I have fixed prices. I have fixed service requirements.
Define to me what a fixed crisis is.
Fixed prices.
Price. Okay.
Price.
Okay.
I had 20%.
Got hearing aids. I have trouble hearing. My wife says it's selective, but now I have no excuse. And she's right, I don't.
We had 20% inflation, and we spent a lot of money trying to get service where it needed to be. And that is something that we have, because of our bill not getting some of the reforms that we wanted and the inflation, we've had to, take a different, a different approach now.
When do you think the American taxpayer will see a return on the 5-year Delivering for America program?
Well,
And do you think we'll ever break even? Let's just be honest.
Listen, I am working at this with a whole bunch of people pretty hard with that aspiration. But I came in $100 billion into a $300 billion losing
Right.
trajectory.
Well, look, I love the post office. Before I got to Congress, I was very active in the eBay trade. If you left a truck parked in front of my house very long, parts were probably coming off and getting sold on eBay. But are the rules and regulations included in your program tailored to enable the post office to keep up with the private sector?
No. We have a Postal Regulatory Commission. We have some very, very specific, how I move my freight and my mail and packages can all be tied to the pickup time in a collection box 30 miles outside of Roanoke, Virginia. Okay, and there's all sorts of, different rules and longstanding practices and business processes that need to be changed, and we're in fact changing them.
Okay,
And,
let me cut into that. Yeah, in my district, the Maryville office, I felt like they needed a significant overhaul. They keep getting stuck with temporary postmasters, and after temporary postmasters, could you commit to my folks in East Tennessee that we could improve this situation? Because, and I get it, it's the dadgum federal government, and people get moved upstairs when they ought to be kicked out. And I think that's part of the problem. But if you would commit to that, it would.
What post that? Where is it, sir?
Maryville. It's pronounced Maryville if you're from there, but you would pronounce it Maryville, Maryville. It's in Blount County, backs right up the Smoky Mountains.
I get made fun of in the Senate when I speak. So.
Yeah, well, East Tennessee is the only place in America where people don't speak with an accent, sir. I appreciate it. And I would like to say for the record, Mr. Speaker, our brother Conley's back. The Lord does answer prayers, and I prayed for you as many people did, and I'm glad you're back with us, brother. All kidding aside.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts.
Thank you. Welcome, Postmaster General DeJoy. First of all, I want to thank you for coming up to Boston and looking at the potential of relocating the general mail facility there. I got a sense of how hard you're working at some of these things, so I want to thank you for that. Inspector General Hull, thank you as well for attending. Just to go back to the vehicle situation at the post office. So, according to the Inspector General's office, the post office has about 230,000 vehicles. I think you're second only to the Department of Defense. Is that right?
I don't know what the Department of Defense has, but we're 230,000 vehicles. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And the last time we looked at this issue, we had almost a quarter of those vehicles had exceeded their life expectancy of 24 years. Is that your guess on that?
Life expectancy was 20, and they're all, when I get done with 100,000 vehicles in 4 years, I'll still have 100,000 vehicles outside their useful life.
Right. It's pretty bad. I did have a chance to see a demonstration of the new electric vehicle. The carriers love it. The letter carriers love it. The package delivery folks, rave about it. It's got a side thing where it's a lot safer. They can actually take the packages out from the sidewalk. So it's getting pretty good reviews from the people who use it. Not to mention, it actually has seat belts and it has air conditioning, which none of the vehicles, none of those 230,000 vehicles, believe it or not, had air conditioning, which you know, I can only imagine how it is down south trying to deliver mail in those older vehicles. So really pleased with the progress that you've made there. I know that we were able to give the post office about $3 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act. What's that going to buy us in this current, you know, transaction in terms of, I know Oshkosh is producing some of these vehicles, is that right?
So
These are U.S. produced vehicles, right?
U.S. produced vehicles.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We had $1.9 billion for infrastructure, which means buying charging stations, going out, implementing charging stations in our new sorting and delivery centers right now, and you know, deploying vehicles there. We got $1.2 billion to use, to use as an offset to the increase in the electric vehicle price versus a standard vehicle that we would have bought. If an electric vehicle costs approximately $75,000, and a base vehicle would have cost $55,000, we applied a $20,000 to that. And that kept us I didn't wait, you know, there was a lot of discussion on that to keep us. We had to get the vehicles to go in where we had already existing amperage, which is where we went to our sorting and delivery centers. We needed a pretty deliberate, you know, plan in terms of implementation and so forth. So that's working good. And we also bought 10,000 Ford E-Transits, which we're trying to get deployed. They're left-hand drive. So, and all of this is over the next, you know, 5-6 years. So there's imbalances in terms of what we're doing, but we're getting them deployed.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was informed delivery. So you get an app on the post office officer. This is a rollout, so it's not going completely smoothly, but you've got an app here where you can actually look at your mail before it arrives when it comes onto the general mail facility. And it's not completely available to everybody right now, and I'm a little concerned about that. Some addresses are not eligible, but when you think about it, you've got close to 170 million addresses and delivery points. Why can we not turn this into a revenue stream for the post office? If everybody's going to be looking, you know, potentially, you roll this out, everybody's looking at what's coming in their mail. You know, other companies will want to piggyback on that to advertise when somebody's buying, you know, say a gardening product or something like that. There's, if other producers are trying to, you know, sell their products into that same market, this is what Amazon is doing, basically. You know?
100%. When I came here, we had about 30 million people on the service. I pushed and worked with the team, and we're up to almost 60 million. Now, you need other things to make it work. We need a good delivery system. We need a good information system. We're redoing our whole tracking and tracing and form system. We used it during the COVID test kit distribution to go into areas and give messaging about ordering. And we had a click-through percentage on that when we send, if somebody signs up for informed delivery, we send an email. They open that email. It was a very, very high rate. And that's how, right, and the click-through rate was, you know, probably like 5%, which is big in terms of marketing. And this is the whole plan. We need to use that, and we're building that out to inspire a delivery. And I think we get this program set up right and make the fixes that we need to make in how we move mail and packages together in an integrated manner from 5 networks we had when I got here down to 1. Okay, things will be delivered and collected from residences that we're not even imagining right now. People will use this, and that system will be part of it.
Yeah, all these other members are talking about a revenue problem. We have a revenue problem here. Yeah. So I'm just saying this has huge potential if we could focus on it. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Before I recognize Mr. Sessions, I recognize Ranking Member for a unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apropos Mr. Lynch's comments, I ask unanimous consent to enter in the record an article from Government Executive dated June 1, 2023, titled Federal Agencies Could Save $6 Billion by Electrifying Their Fleets. Report findings.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair now recognizes Mr. Sessions from Texas for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Postmaster General, welcome.
How are you, sir?
I heard your comments. They were well-written. I think they were true. I don't think that you would say that things went smoothly, but you did acknowledge that they were on a plan. You did acknowledge a lot of things that I believe are frailties that are being worked on. As you know, I engaged the Postal Service down in Texas, outside of Houston, about major problems of delivery. That happened, and we got over it. Are there any more things like that that you foresee in the coming year as other people will be coming online with this new system? Or what do you think there?
Just, and I thank you for those comments and for your patience while we went through Houston, which was the opening of South Houston, which was, sir, the plan, the projects and facilities that we are deploying are not revolutionary.
Well, they were a learning process for you. I'm simply, this not being mean, I'm simply.
No.
Do you anticipate
So,
rolling that program out, or have you learned enough?
We've already rolled out 11 sites with less consequence. We had the three. We had Georgia, Richmond, and this Houston one. We have 11 other sites that are going well. I'm processing 1.7 million packages in Indianapolis right now.
Well, I don't know what else is in your basket that you intend to do during the year. All I'm simply saying is, do you have any?
I think we have significant mitigations that in place right now to not first of all, we have to absorb the capacity we deployed. The team is much more experienced in being deployed. The staffing is much more stabilized. And I think we will not be without error, but I don't plan to shut down cities.
Good. My conversation with you that you've already begun is the process of emailing people about this delivery. I think that is exceptional. I think it will work. As you know, there are lots of growth areas across the country where the changes in the program that started years ago, but nobody applied, about moving to cluster boxes from mail boxes. I think that could be utilized very well to let people know they had mail somewhere. I'd like to turn this conversation now to a conversation that is relatively new, and that is of a term called DOGE. And I'm one of the three co-chairmen of the DOGE caucus that is here, and essentially we're interested in efficiencies, yes, efficiencies mostly, but on the other side of that is saving money. It would be my request to you that the post office find perhaps a better way to deal with those that would wish to deal with you on this concept of moving the post office during this period of time when there will be lots of conversation about this and other matters of government efficiency. I have found in the past, not to be critical, that the post office does not always place its highest priority off saving money. I know you're busy, but I have had several conversations where we have referred potential savings, and I'm not sure that we heard an answer back. So you're going to get ready to see these things come publicly, and I just think it would be good for you to establish with me, or because I'm generally your point of contact, a way that we can specifically look at efficiency, to hear your ideas and you hear ours, to save money on your side and also from us.
Yeah, I'm happy to engage in any discussion with.
Okay, well,
Okay.
just Peter knows, your staff knows that we've sent these things to you and they went down in your organization. I have yet to hear things back. I want to thank you for your time. I'll be quite blunt. If we had your reconfirmation up today, I would vote yes for you and your team.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Conley from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our two witnesses. And let me begin by saying to the Postmaster General, I've been a critic, but I have to say I am persuaded in your tenure and in your testimony today that you are certainly committed to the Postal Service and in making it viable. We're not going to agree on a lot, and I'm going to remain critical, but my hat is off to your commitment, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Hull, the Postmaster General's got a 10-year plan called Delivering for America. Is that correct? And please speak directly into the microphone so we can hear you.
Yes, that's correct.
Louder.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And did that plan include either a break-even financial position by the end of it or even a slight profit?
So the initial plan did. The Postal Service just released 2.0, the updated version of the plan, and the updated version did not include that information.
So we had one in 1.0, but not in 2.0. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Correct, yes. Correct.
And why was that? Why would we drop a financial projection of either a slight profit or a break even and be silent about it, apparently?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I assume there were uncertainties, but that would be a good question for you.
Could it possibly be because the plan, in fact, is not working?
That would be a great question for Mr. DeJoy.
Well, how many rate increases have there been in the last 2 years in the Postal Service?
Don't know the answer to that question, but
Mr.
been several rate increases.
Mr. DeJoy, do you know the answer to that question? How many rate increases have we experienced?
I think 6 or 7.
6 or 7. And what normally the Postal Regulatory Commission, as I understand it, might approve 1, but 6 or 7 would be a little bit out of the norm, would it not? I mean, you made the point that we are below industrial countries' average, and that's a good point. But as you know, that's not how consumers experience it. They experience it, whether they're businesses, package deliverers, or individual homes, they experience it as inflationary relative to what they were paying previously. And 6 to 7 rate increases is a lot. Ms. Hull, the Postmaster General noted that, as did the ranking member, that we're going to lose $9.5 billion projected this year. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And it was $6.5 billion last year. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's a big increase. When you're losing $9.5 billion in the midst of a 10-year plan, isn't it a little difficult to say success?
I think financially there have been some serious challenges, and that's why we are pushing for increased transparency into the finances of the Postal Service so that those targets and the trade-offs can be clearer.
Well, what do you mean by transparency? For example, would one of the elements of transparency be tell us when you think we're going to break even or have a small profit?
Yeah, just give some financial projections overall, right, on the results of the plan.
And that's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, I got it.
Were those projections included in DFA 2.0?
No, they were not.
Why not?
No,
No, I'm asking you as the Inspector General, did you inquire as to why that was missing? That seems kind of important to me in any financial plan.
Right, yeah. When we issued our report on the Delivering for America plan, it was prior to the 2.0 being released. And so one of the recommendations that we made was that the financial projections that were in 1.0 were not really relevant anymore. So many things had changed, and so it's really important for the Postal Service to release updated financial projections. That recommendation, I think, is due to be closed the end of this year or early next, and so we did make a recommendation to that effect in that report.
it seems to me that's got to be an important part of any plan if it's going to generate confidence both in the consuming public and here in Congress. I thank you both for being here today, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Palmer from Alabama.
I'm going to deviate a little bit from the questions that have been asked, Mr. DeJoy. I've got a constituent who reached out, and I'm sure other members of Congress have constituents that raise concerns about the post office. But his concern is about the poor conditions of one of the post offices in my district, the Meadowbrook Post Office. For 3.5 years, he's tried to call the postal inspectors to discuss this with them and has not heard back. Is it normal procedure that the postal inspectors don't return calls from
Not that I'm aware of. We know sometimes don't give good information, or might have been referred to a facilities group, but inspectors usually respond.
He's raised specific concerns about the disposal of waste and trash that's accumulating in the parking areas. I don't know the age of this individual, but I've gotten concerns raised for another post office by some of my constituents who are elderly, about access to their post office boxes. They have, in this one particular case, the boxes are outside. But in this particular post office case, he says there's just regular trash, old furniture is on the property. There's a hole in front and backflow from water. It's just indicative of a lack of maintenance of the facility that, this guy says that he's been calling for 3.5 years and hadn't heard back. I hope he wasn't on hold.
So we have 31,000 facilities, all in disrepair. I've put $2.5 billion in over the last 3 years. If you give me this location, I will check on it, and
I'll have my staff reach out
yeah,
to you.
I'll make
on
sure
that.
we'll-
Let me ask you another question. I've got some concerns, and for individuals, they can buy whatever vehicle they want to, but the post office under the Green New Deal is moving rapidly into EVs. What's the cost differential between a gas-powered vehicle and an electric vehicle?
just to buy the vehicle.
Yeah, to buy the vehicle.
For the vehicles that we need, in terms of the special purpose vehicle, I'd say, that we're getting built, it's about $20,000. Or coming on the off-the-shelf vehicles, maybe $10,000.
For an electric vehicle?
Yeah.
I'll need to
Yeah.
check on that. I'm concerned about this because I'm looking at the minimum range is 25 miles. I'm not sure between charges. That's
Yeah.
what I saw.
Now, ours is about 70, but our average use is about coming in around 25 miles. So we're looking at ways now to expand the ratio between the vehicles and the chargers because we're in close proximity. Our average route is short, 20 miles, 15 miles, 10 miles in some cases.
It's my understanding, though, that this transition is going to be fairly expensive, and obviously we all have concerns about the fiscal condition of the post office. And
So what I would say is the Congress gave us $3 billion, and we're using it wisely. And I think I wouldn't have done it unless we thought it was financially, viable and good for the service. We needed vehicles. This was the way we were able to move forward, and I think we worked a good strategy with regard to this.
we'll see how it works out, but I have a feeling, Mr. Chairman, we'll be discussing this again. I yield back.
Gentlemen, would you yield your last 40 seconds, if you don't mind? Mr. Joy, there have been reports about, the new administration clawing back unspent COVID funds and things like that. where are we with the funds that were allocated in the postal reform bill that passed this committee in a
Well,
bipartisan
we-
way? And then there were two pots of money I'm curious about, the pot with the postal reform bill and the pot where it had the money in the infrastructure bill for the electric vehicles. Where are we on that?
So we'll start with the electric vehicles. That was legislation that was passed. In the IRA.
Infrastructure
It was
bill.
given to us. We have that money. We've made commitments against that money to buy vehicles. We have and to.
What percent have you spent? I know you can't spend it all at once
Not
because they
all,
don't
but I
make
have to
enough
get back
electric
to you, but
vehicles.
I would say so there's commitment in terms of plan commitment. That's all spent because that's how, and then there's commitment in terms of contract commitment.
There you
which
go.
is some percentage I'd have to get back.
Let us know that.
Okay, but
All right. Sure.
with regard to the other one, I'd like to, the postal reform adjustment that was made, there was no cash in that. That was strictly the reversal of the pre-funding
Right. Okay.
thing that
Very good point.
okay?
All right. Chair recognizes Mr. Kristamorte from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. DeJoy, for your service. Mr. DeJoy, service standards have unfortunately been going down during your tenure. According to your own performance report for this quarter, I am holding this up. It says, national single-piece first-class mail, two-day performance was 85.9% on time, which is a 4.9-point decrease over the same period last year. That's what this quarterly report says, right?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but if you say so, yes.
Yes, sir. And the price of a stamp was 55 cents in 2020, right?
Yeah.
And the price of a stamp today is 73 cents, correct?
Correct?
Okay, so we've seen now 6 increases during your time in office. And what bothers me and what some other people have pointed out is not only has the price of stamps gone up so much, these forever stamps have now gone up 6 times during your tenure. That's 46% during a time when you say that inflation has gone up 20%. Something else has gone up, and that's your compensation, sir. Your total compensation was almost $481,000 in your first full year of pay in 2021, and your total compensation in 2024 is $561,000 all in, a 17% increase. Isn't that right?
I have no idea.
It's right here in your
Okay.
compensation table, in
You
your
study it.
USPS report.
You pay more attention to it than I do.
I doubt that, but let's take a look at this.
I promise
During
you
your
that.
tenure, sir, you have received over $2.1 million in compensation. $2.1 million in compensation just during your tenure. So what bothers me is this. During your tenure, service standards have gone down. Affordability of mail has gone down. Your compensation has gone way, way, way up. And that's deeply, deeply troubling. Let me turn your attention to another issue, which my constituents bring this up to me all the time. Mr. DeJoy, when the mail is not delivered, for whatever reason, you're aware that letter carriers are required to complete a, quote, undelivered mail report, correct?
Yes.
Let me show you some of the undelivered mail reports that have come to our attention. This first one says, instructed to leave mail behind. Isn't that what it says?
I can't see that far.
Would you like us to
I'll
bring it
take
up
your
to you?
word for it. I'll take
Okay.
your word for it.
Let me show you another undelivered mail report. The report says, instructed to leave mail hundreds of flats. That's what this report says, right?
If you say so, I agree.
Let me show you another undelivered mail report. Instructed to leave mail behind by management. And then let me show you a fourth undelivered mail report that came to our attention. Do you see this? At the very bottom, it says, quote, "Delivering for America," exclamation point, question mark, laughable. Isn't that what it's saying?
That's what you're saying, so I'll take your word for it.
Let me show you some images and pictures that came to us, which is highly unusual. We never received these things, but we received it recently. This is what election week looked like in Des Plaines, Illinois' post office with mail that was left behind. Election week. That's a mess. Let's show you another picture. Palatine, Illinois. This is in my district. Parcels piled on high. This is a complete mess and completely unacceptable.
So do
This
you
is
think
not
this is
delivering
new
for
to
America.
my
This
tenure,
is
sir? Do
This
you think
is
this is
leaving
new to
mail
my
behind
tenure?
for America.
Do you think this did not exist before I got here?
This is during your tenure, sir. Let me ask you about a last topic. Are you familiar with, have you walked the halls of Cannon where they show the pieces of art from the high school art competition?
No.
Okay. When you walk the hall it's called the Cannon Tunnel, there are pieces of artwork that are hung there. All of us pick through the high school art competition a winner and display their artwork for everyone to see. It's one of our biggest sources of pride, for me at least, and I suspect for a lot of my colleagues. Recently, we had a winner declared in my district, and my district office took the art and sent it by priority mail through the U.S. mail, and it was lost in the mail. It was lost in the mail, sir. It was one of the most challenging conversations we've ever had with a constituent. A young teenager who worked her heart out creating a piece of art, and we had to tell her, "We're so sorry. The USPS lost your art in the mail." Sir, this is just one story out of numerous stories in my district of people losing mail or having their mail delayed. That includes medications, that includes Social Security bills, that includes small business payments. Service standards keep going down, sir. Unfortunately, the forever stamps, the cost of them keep going up forever. And the losses and the salaries and compensation are piling up. When you say in this report, delivering for America is working, I respectfully submit you're oblivious to public opinion. Delivering America is not working, and it needs to be returned to sender. Thank you, sir.
What would be the alternative you would offer right now?
May I answer the question?
Sure.
I think you got to live up to the service standards that the American public expects of you. Those are the service standards that you publish, that you keep lowering on this piece of paper here. This is a joke. It says here, pre-sort overnight delivery of first-class flats. The standard is 95% on time for 2024. This year, it's gone to 80%. That is ridiculous. That's not overnight mail anymore. That's kind of overnight. It might be two-night, three-night. It might be never at this point.
Those standards would not.
That's unacceptable.
That is not an accurate comparison. Pre-sort mail is not at 80%.
It's right here.
Well, I don't know what you got then. Maybe I take back everything I said I agreed to.
First-class flats, overnight, 95% is the target on-time delivery for fiscal year 2024. Do you not agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
I don't remember. So I'll say okay.
Okay. This is your enclosure from this latest report, fiscal year 25 market dominant performance targets. First-class mail.
I'm gonna let you all iron this out like we did with Ms. Norton. We went gave you 2.5 more minutes.
Hold on. Let me just finish my sentence.
Finish.
This says first-class flats overnight target percentage fiscal year 2025, 80%.
All right, and you can submit additional questions at the conclusion. Chair recognizes Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am, sir. I'll give you an action item. I know that you got a lot of places, but I got a call from one of my bosses yesterday. He went to the Dairy Street in Harrisburg post office to buy a roll of stamps, 100 stamps. and he was told, we don't have any. Now, that's one of the money-making, I think, portions of your business. I think we can agree. Is that something that's endemic? Is that something that, is that associated with personnel issues, or is you're not able to produce them enough, or is that just a one-off? What do you know about? I mean, I got to answer my boss here.
I have not heard that before. So
You have or have not?
I have not.
Okay.
So I'll look into
Please,
it.
please check for me. I want to talk to you. I know there's been a lot made of this EV purchase, and according to, I think, the Postal Museum, your current cost for a traditional, what I'll call traditional vehicle, is $11,651, and the cost for the electric vehicle is $59,000. So that's a $47,000 increase, or at 66,000 vehicles, $125 million. Now, this is probably your opportunity to tell
That was the
us.
cost in 1987 when
what-
we bought them.
Is that, what's that?
That was the cost in 1987 when we bought the LLVs.
Okay, so that's what the museum says, right? So I'll take your word for it, right? And I'm sure since 1987 it's gone up. My bigger question is this, and this might be your opportunity to be critical of this place, of Congress. I think you stated that the subsidy from the IRA is what makes the cost of the EV, it makes it worth the effort, charging, et cetera, making the change, the additional cost, and so on and so forth. Can you quantify that? What is the subsidy, if you will, provided for each vehicle that the post office procures?
Well, I think once in place in our particular route system we have 300,000.
Yeah, sir, I get that you've kind of done the numbers, but
So
that portends to me that you know the numbers. So what is the subsidy? You've done look, this has been your business even when you were in the private sector to a certain extent, right? So do you have a number? What does that look like? Because with all due respect, I guess, to a certain extent, Congress is either mandating or incentivizing the purchase, but the American people are paying for it, whether they buy stamps or whether they pay their taxes. So I'm trying to discern what that cost is.
You gave us money for us to pursue a certain initiative.
Yeah.
I needed vehicles, right? So we had $1.9 billion. I've purchased enough vehicles to deploy an infrastructure for $1.9 billion. Okay, then I have $1.2 billion for vehicles. I used $1.2 billion to neutralize the increase from gas vehicles on the purchase price to electric vehicles.
Sir,
That's more or less.
I get the point, but look, I didn't run the numbers. I suppose we can. Maybe Ms. Hull can at some point. What I'm trying to see, when you say we gave you, yeah, the United States Congress, the United States government took money away from the American people who are also, and I'm not saying this is your fault, but they're paying for the post office when they buy stamps and buy service for delivery, so on and so forth. But now they're also paying for this transition, and I'm trying to get you to help me evaluate the worthiness, the additional cost. What is that? What is that additional cost per vehicle?
If the Congress wanted us to pursue electrification of our fleet.
Say that first part again.
If the Congress wanted us to pursue electrification of our fleet, which is why they gave us the money.
So let me ask you this, then.
I think we used the money appropriately.
Let me ask the question a different way. If Congress hadn't provided the incentive or the mandate or the requirement or whatever you want to call it, would you, as a business manager, have pursued this effort on your own? Would the payback be there? Would the financial, would the numbers support the decision?
I would not have pursued it as aggressively and deliberately as we have.
Okay,
But when
fair
we
enough.
came out with the vehicles, we had 10% in electric vehicles.
Let me ask you this question, because I'm running out of time here. I think you said at the Senate hearing that 80% of your cost is labor. Does that seem right? 80%?
It's 75 to 80%.
75 to
Somebody
80%. So I don't know what your business model, and I say yours, the post office's business model has lost in revenue over the past 40 years. It's probably pretty high, probably above 50%, right? So you as a former private sector delivery guy, would you in a business that is losing money at that level then transition your contract employees to full-time employees with the additional benefits and cost? Would that be something that you would do as a private business?
Well, I did it in in the circumstances that I was in. There was, I had 60%.
You did it now, sir, or you did
I
it then?
did it well, I would make the business decisions that I need to make, looking at all the elements
I get it.
of the situation that I am in. And that is what, in fact, I did. I did not just put 100,000 people on the payroll. I have 20,000 people less than when I walked in the door. I'm burning 45 million hours less than when we got.
I understand you have
I
less
have to hire
employees, but you have more
200,000 people.
full-time employees with all the benefits and the associated costs, and that's the point, sir.
What's that?
I understand you're trying to manage this, but I don't think in any other industry, look, I ran a business too. When I was hemorrhaging money, isn't the time I went out and hired people because I couldn't afford to pay them. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
I came here during the pandemic. I need to deliver mail to 167 million addresses. I couldn't hire people. I compete with Amazon, UPS, and FedEx, right? All of it does. It doesn't reside with me. The place was a mess when I got here.
So, sir, if you could enumerate what could be done differently here to help you, that would be helpful to us. I yield.
Chair recognizes Ms. Brown. Wow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I truly thank the Postmaster General for being here today. The Postal Service is critical to the well-being of economic success and peace of mind for people across America. Congress took historic bipartisan action to reform and improve the Postal Service in the 117th Congress, yet the USPS is still lagging with underperforming response times, funding gaps, and delayed upgrades. As it has been repeatedly stated, according to the Postal Service's own data, the on-time delivery rate in some areas in my district is barely hitting 70%. These are historically low service standards and far below the expected and promised rate of 95%, and I think we can all agree that this is unacceptable. And as we all know, poor performance disproportionately impacts low-income communities, which is also alarming. As you know, the holiday season is referred to as peak season. The surge in mail, cards, and packages for people across the country make for an understandably busy time for the USPS, but also a predictable one. So last month, the Office of Inspector General issued an audit report identifying potential risk and evaluating the Postal Service preparedness for this year's peak season. And 2024 might be the biggest year ever for holiday mail deliveries. Black Friday had its biggest online year on record, and all those packages and products are now making their way through the mail system. This, of course, complicates efforts to deliver the everyday mail people rely on for their health and economic security. These critical and life-saving deliveries do not stop during the winter months. In fact, they are more vital than ever. So, Postmaster DeJoy, how are you balancing the holiday surge with routine essential deliveries?
Thank you for your question, Congresswoman. We have added a significant amount of processing capability around the country with conveyor systems and new plant openings, throughout the nations. We also have redefined our transportation methodologies and practices, adding a significant carrier base across the nation. We also do this because of our stabilization efforts within our staffing. We did not have to add. We were adding 50,000 people a season when I got here. We added about 7,000 this year. So we are moving product throughout the country in a line. My position on the service standards are the service standards, our measurement practices on service standards are ludicrous, and we're getting them changed. This is why we filed something. But 50% of the mail and packages will be delivered a day in advance in the standard, 85% on time, and 95% within a day. And while we're making all these changes, that is a pretty good, outcome for the magnitude of what we're doing. We will watch this as it gets closer to Christmas, and we will do accelerated processes to move it even faster.
Thank you very much. Every day, people in my community rely on Postal Service to get their Social Security checks, disability benefits, and prescription medications. We understand individuals waiting for their checks in the mail face extra challenges. Receiving checks promptly can be crucial for maintaining basic needs like keeping the lights on or putting food on the table. These are people who are relying on the timely delivery of their essential mail. The data in my district show lower income communities experience poor on-time delivery performance compared to wealthier ones. So Postmaster DeJoy, are you aware of the disparities of delivery performance related to socioeconomic status? And what is your plan to get service in historically disadvantaged areas up to standard?
So I am not aware of, I mean, we have a lot, there's a lot of areas like this and a lot of new reporting that was just put out in the last 2 years. Our goal this year is a big transition year for all the different types of things that we're doing, and we put in for a new standard. But our goal, once the network is satisfied, is to provide all 167 million delivery points with on-time service, no matter where they are.
Thank you so much. Well, I am very pleased that you're here. I am disappointed by the USPS's delayed implementation of major upgrades, its worsening condition, and persistent failure to meet its own on-time delivery standards, particularly in low-income communities. I think we can agree that this is no way to run a critical agency delivering necessities to individuals in all of our districts. But again, I thank you for your service and your being here to address these needs, and look forward to productive conversations on how we can improve this vital institution. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Timmons from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, thank you for being here today. I want to talk to you about the next generation delivery vehicle fleet. I represent Greenville and Spartanburg, South Carolina. Oshkosh has decided to manufacture tens of thousands of NGDVs in my district, and there was recent media reporting that the incoming administration may cancel the contract. And I want to walk through that because I think that the media report was inaccurate, and I think a very reasonable policy is on the horizon that I'm actually excited about. So the original contract was entered into in March of 2022, and the initial order was 50,000 NGDVs in a mix of 90% internal combustion engine and 10% battery electric vehicle. Is that correct?
I'm not sure the exact date, but yeah, that was the split.
Generally.
Yeah,
And how did you come up with the 90-10 ratio of internal combustion to electric vehicles?
We needed, the design and the acquisition had been on the table for 6 or 7 years.
Okay, so why was it changed in February of 23 to go to 70% electric vehicles to 30% combustion engine?
6 years prior to my being here, the acquisition of a next generation vehicle was on the table. Okay, I came here. We needed vehicles. I pushed I worked with the board, and the purchasing people made the selection. I pushed to move forward, of which 90% we ordered the 50,000 vehicles. And we said, let's dip our toe and look at what electric vehicles will do for us.
So you made a business decision to go 90-10.
With the board, we made a business decision.
That was probably a good decision at the time, right?
Right.
So why did Congress then force you to switch that to 70-30?
Well, we had about 500 lawsuits. In order to buy vehicles, I have to go through a whole bunch of different, I have to file an SEIS report, I have to go through the EPA, I have to go through all the state stuff, so on and so forth.
So it was against your business judgment to deviate from the 90% internal combustion engine and 10% electric vehicle, and you completely flipped to 70-30 electric vehicle to combustion engine. Why did that happen?
I didn't completely flip. It was a process that went on over a number of months, dealing with all the different activities we had, and eventually, I would not be at this particular point in time if you didn't give us the $3 billion.
Okay, so if we switch back to 90% combustion engine and we fulfill the order, will that meet your business judgment, and will that allow you to deliver mail?
Will it allow me to deliver mail?
Will it achieve the objective of getting you new vehicles? Okay, let's put it this way.
I think we are down this path. It's a good path.
I've talked to Oshkosh. They can switch back to 90-10. They don't care. So if we,
I don't want to discuss my contracts here.
okay, well, I care about jobs in my district, and I want
Okay.
to make sure that you get the new vehicles that you need.
And I guess I helped you out here.
And, oh, yeah, well, but this is the thing. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You need new vehicles, and there's no reason that we should spend $1 billion plus more dollars to impose a Green New Deal mandate on the post office. So we're going to work to switch back to what was your best business judgment, 90% combustion engine, 10% electric vehicles, and we're going to work with
business judgment at the time with where the
what
electric
changed
market-
in 10 months?
Well, a lot has changed in 10 months with regard to the nation's initiative to the to electrification, to other initiatives that we have with regard to carbon burning. We're a carbon burning pig, right? We run around the country.
All right. Okay, let's put it this way. If the incoming Trump administration wants to switch back to 90% combustion engines, can they do that through executive action?
I have my plan. Then we're proceeding with the plan that we have, unless something.
Unless you receive direction from Congress and the executive branch, because you're going to get it.
Direction is, I always get direction, right? It has to be legislation.
Okay.
And
Does
I
it have?
follow
Wait,
the
wait,
law.
wait. Was it legislatively mandated to switch from 90% combustion engine, 10% electric vehicle to 70% battery, 30%?
I was given $3 billion, and I worked a process and a methodology.
When were you
to
given
move
$3 billion?
forward.
In the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think any American believes that reduced inflation, and that money needs to go back
I don't
to
know what you
addressing
want.
our debt and
I
our
don't-
deficit, and we can't spend
But then
recklessly.
you
This
shouldn't
is-
have passed it, sir.
I didn't
You
vote
shouldn't
for it.
have
I
passed
can
it.
promise you that.
You
and
shouldn't
guess
have
what?
passed it.
Congress is about to fix it. So I look forward to working with the incoming Trump administration to right this ship and to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. They are out of balance, and I want to protect the environment as much as anybody, but we got $36 trillion in debt. We run a $2 trillion deficit. This is reckless, and we need to be competitive in the global economy, and we can't do that if we spend money we don't have. I'm one of millions of Americans that had planned to purchase a house that can't because my 2.5% mortgage is looking up at a 7% interest rate. So this had consequences. It hurt the American people, and we're going to fix this. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Kassar from Texas.
Good afternoon, Mr. DeJoy. In August of last year, I sent you a letter signed by 76 members of Congress asking for the Postal Service to proactively implement OSHA's proposed rule that would protect workers from the extreme heat. And the response was, you declined. And that's frustrating and confusing to me, so that's some of the questions I want to ask you about today. Being a congressman from Texas, my letter carriers talk about being able to fry an egg in their unair-conditioned vehicles on a hot day. Coming from labor before I was an elected official, part of my job, tragically, was to organize funerals and memorials for workers that work in the outdoors in places like Texas that when they get denied a water break or overstress in the heat can get hurt or die. The proposed OSHA rule, to be clear, would apply to most of the private industry and to the Postal Service, and it's pretty simple. It would just require that when the temperature gets above 90 degrees, workers are able to take a 15-minute break every couple hours and have water readily available to them. We know how important this kind of protection would be for postal workers on any given day. We know that people like Eugene Gates, who was a a longtime Postal Service employee, longtime letter carrier, tragically lost his life due to heat stroke, carrying mail in Texas in the 104-degree heat last year. Also the case for Wendy Johnson, a USPS worker in North Carolina who lost her life inside of a metal USPS truck in 95-degree heat just this last year. And that's just two of over 170,000 American workers who are injured and killed because of heat stress on any given year. You could have agreed to use the proposed Department of Labor rule that's gone under extensive review, but instead you declined any voluntary changes. Essentially, the letter said that OSHA would have to force the USPS to do this kind of protection for USPS workers. So I would like an explanation to it, but then my first question for you is also in your response, you said the Postal Service already has a heat prevention plan for workers and says in the letter, quote, that it is recognized as extremely successful. The current USPS plan has a mandatory annual heat illness training for workers, which is supposed to allow letter carriers to take breaks to cool down from the heat. But last year, the press investigated and reported that there were thousands of letter carriers across at least 10 states who didn't receive the training, but and they found fake records saying the Postal Service had provided that training. So do you think I've summed this up appropriately, Mr. DeJoy, or do you have concerns about what you've heard about in the press about the fake records about heat protection for workers? And can you talk to me a little bit about what steps y'all are taking?
We don't believe that the records were fake. They were batch loaded. Instead of individually loaded. So we think the press report was inaccurate. Was my briefing on that situation. With regard to the OSHA, it's something that's in process and being studied. We have our own program, which has been here for decades and has been reviewed and negotiated, and with the involvement of our unions and so forth, and it's recognized as a good program. If the OSHA plan comes out and gets approved, we'll evaluate aspects of that and maybe incorporate it into our plan. So certainly we have many carriers that go out in heat, in areas of heat, and we have these unfortunate issues, often where people have underlying health issues that have this unfortunate outcome that we have. But we feel getting new vehicles with air conditioning in them will be a big help. We're pushing to do that. But we'll study the plan. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of things, and a lot of things that have been around for a long time.
Understood, Mr. DeJoy.
A lot to change.
And I think amongst all of those things, we know that the lives and health and safety, including of your employees with underlying health conditions, which of course is so many Americans, should be of tantamount importance. And so whether or not this Politico investigation across multiple states showed falsified heat records or not, I hope that you'll reconsider this decision, because some places in Texas aren't going to get the new vehicles for years.
Yeah.
And that's if members on the other side of the aisle don't try to defund those vehicles. And so I hope you will take a look, with worsening summers, with 2 of your own employees having died here, that we take this really seriously and you reconsider, because I can tell you right now that if I was sitting on that side of the desk, I would raise my hand and swear an oath that I'd spoken with your own employees who've told me they've been reprimanded for going off route to get a drink of water, that they've gotten in trouble for trying to take a break. And whether or not that's your intention, I hope that you really look into it and do everything you can. I know that it's not your intention, to be clear. I know it's not your intention, but I hope that you do something about it. Honestly, it would really, really make a big difference. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Higgins from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, welcome back before Congress. My goodness. Mail delivery, I think all of us should acknowledge, is a very personal thing. And therefore, as representatives of our constituents, we receive, all of us do, 435 offices. We receive the most heartfelt messages from our constituents with very personal interactions with their post office and their mail carrier. And we take those communications seriously. And I have to say, good sir, that you have been strong, man. 4.5 years on a thankless job, appearing before Congress. And attack from both sides of the aisle. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's certainly consistent when it comes to Mr. DeJoy appearing before committees of Congress in both chambers, the House and the Senate. So, referencing my acknowledgement that mail delivery is very personal interaction with the federal government. Would you agree with that, Mr. DeJoy, historically?
I think it's, there's a quality auditor at the end of every delivery.
Into the mic just a little bit.
There's a quality auditor at the end of every delivery, which is your everyone's constituents and
Right,
my
so-
customers. And
I'm just saying that, like, especially for, say, our elders, many of our elders across the country whom we love and respect, their personal interaction with their government that they love every day is commonly limited to how they get their mail and maybe some brief exchange with their carrier. So my father used to say that son, if you take care of the small things in life, you will have established some habits wherein the big things take care of themselves. So I'd like to talk to you about a small issue that I think is reflective of the kind of challenges my colleagues on both sides of the aisle face and on a regular basis from my constituency. I want to hear how you can deal with this. I have a small town of Henderson. It's under 2,000 people in my district. And in October of last year, they lost their contract postal unit, their CPU. So it had been considered the little post office in the town for a long time, but it was actually a private contract with the post office, and the guy retired. So we ended up with about just 50 or 60 addresses with no post box, you know, no delivery mechanism at their address. You know, they had no means by which to receive their mail other than driving to the post office in the next town over, and that's still the case. We have not been able to recontract with a new contract postal unit. I spoke with the mayor. I've been speaking with the mayor since then. His name is Sherman Collette, a great guy. We're trying to fix this problem. So I'm going to ask you, a cluster mailbox, I've looked up the prices, the nicest, most expensive ones to service, 60 to 80 people with smaller drawers and larger drawers would cost under 50 grand. The city has the land and has parking space at their, like the courthouse and the city the city services there are not have, they don't have postal service. They have to drive to the next town. Can't we just solve this simple problem by having a cluster mailbox installed in Little Henderson, USA, and reassure America that you're willing to fix the small things?
So, Congressman, we have my first, there's a saying, you do first what's necessary, right? And trying to get our internal system of operating and moving mail around the country is the first thing that I've got to work on. We are looking at our whole retail and a process, both in terms of large communities and small communities, and how do we address these things? And we have lots of...
We have the answers. I mean,
but put in a cluster box...
Just install a cluster mailbox and deliver it right there at Town Hall.
But we don't install cluster boxes. The developers or the cities and so forth, those are the people that do that. And then whether you get mail delivery there is another set of rules that I agree, are quite specific.
So I'm going to yield. My time has expired, but Mr. DeJoy,
I will look
your
into this.
commitment to
Is
just work
it
with my
Henderson?
office.
Henderson, you said?
Henderson, Louisiana.
Henderson.
It's 50 or 60 Americans that can't get their mail, especially my elders I'm concerned about. You're going to have to drive an entire town over to that post office. Seems like we should be able to fix that in a year in over a year. I'm looking forward to working with your office personally. Let's just resolve that issue. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Lee from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it can't be overstated how vital the Postal Service is to this country. It's the only mail delivery service that reaches every single address in the United States. Yet what's being seen during Postmaster General DeJoy's time is slower deliveries, increased costs, poor and even deadly conditions for employees, and an erosion of trust in this institution. From what I'm hearing in my district in Pittsburgh, the Postal Service's unresponsiveness has added to that distress. Just this year, 15 of your employees working in my district reached out to my office with complaints of an abusive and hostile work environment. They came to my team because they had nowhere else to turn to at the Postal Service. They had made their complaints, they'd gone to those above them, and they still got no help. Those workers sent letters to every one of my office locations because they were so used to being ignored and unheard. It's completely unacceptable to have so many employees reaching out for help and for no one at the Postal Service to do anything about it. So my question, Mr. DeJoy, is do you have a formal process to address employee complaints? And is it just being ignored, or do you have a way to address these issues?
Congressman, we have, the Postal Service has longstanding practices of how to deal with complaints within the organization, going up through my organization, or if there's harassment or other things like you're saying, to go just pick up the phone and call the OIG.
So they were ignored. You have the processes, but they were ignored.
I don't know what incidents, you need to give me more specifics, and I doubt that they were ignored.
Okay, well, I doubt that any of my constituents made that up, but I will definitely connect our team so that we can get those directly to you. We would actually love the opportunity to do that. Can you commit to approving and creating a process or outlining us what it is and actually listen to take action to improve the working conditions of Postal Service employees?
I have converted over 100,000 people to full-time positions. I have made the workplaces significantly better in many of our operations.
Mr. DeJoy, I'm really sorry, but your employees do not agree.
I bet you a bunch of my employees do agree.
Well, the ones in my district don't, so I will not speak to ones outside of my district, but the ones that we've spoken to in my district
15 you're talking
currently don't. I'm certain that we can get more, and of course, we will direct them right to you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Another issue from my district, not of those 15, involves a local tax collector, a job that's an important local government function and relies on timely and accurate mail delivery. Not getting those bills on time or at all can mean late fees or missing out on pay early discounts. One of the problems is mail that's coming back is undeliverable, yet this person didn't get the return to sender until a year later, way past the time needed to catch and fix this issue. So to be clear, something would be mailed out. It would not be returned to sender within a year, so long outside of the window that they could remedy any of the issues for an incorrect address or whatever. Can you explain how it would take over a year to receive a return to sender piece of mail?
If there are processes that we have that are manual processes that have, tens of millions of pieces of mail going through, and there is a reliability rate that's not 100%. So that could happen, and it can get stuck in a casing or in a mailbox, or in a machine or something like that.
Thank you. So this constituent has complained to the Postal Service multiple times about both the return time and the undeliverable addresses themselves. My office has also brought the problem to both the local and federal level Postal Service offices, and it still hasn't improved. The most recent response from the Postal Service is that they consider the problem solved because they no longer received any complaints. Do you know why they aren't receiving the complaints anymore? In order to make a complaint, the constituent has to speak to a manager. Yet every time she goes to the office, no manager can be found. Mr. DeJoy, why is there no follow-up process for customer complaints to make sure a problem has actually been solved?
Well, we do have significant follow-up for customer complaints. We have over 3,000 people in our call centers. We have, people within our retail centers, our 31,000 retail centers for methodologies to file complaints.
So just to be clear, is it just a difficult process? And is it intentionally difficult to just pretend that the problems have been solved or don't exist? Because again, they're marking these as no longer being a problem or considered solved because they're no longer able to complain.
Well, we do have mistakes made, and we do have people that don't do their jobs effectively, right? But I don't.
Yes, I think there are people who maybe don't
As does any organization of our
Certainly.
size.
Thank you so much. We're claiming that client, but I just wanted to say the Postal Service is not going to improve its major problems until they actually listen to their customers and their employees. Right now, it's clear that you're not doing that. It's unacceptable that such a vital part of our country function has become so unreliable and controversial. They need to do better for the American people. I thank you so much for your time, and I yield back.
And I disagree with your premise.
Gentlelady yields back. I'll recognize myself now for my questions. Postmaster DeJoy, we hear, everybody has ideas on how to make the Postal Service better. My concern, as you know, is the hemorrhaging of cash. As I said in my opening statement, I appreciate the fact that you were willing to take this job on. I appreciate the fact that you have a plan and you're trying to implement that plan. That's what we want. That's what we want with DOGE. That's what the American people want. They want people trying to make government more efficient. I think you're trying to do that. When we talk about efficiency, especially members on this side of the aisle, we think of privatization, and you'll have people say, oh, we should privatize the post office. The problem with that is nobody wants to deliver the mail to every house in America 6 days a week and to operate all those retail postal facilities. There's no private company in the world that wants that. So a lot of my friends in my party need to realize that. There's no private company that wants to do that. But there are private companies that are interested in mail sorting. There are private companies that are interested, which is where I think a lot of the problems are from people on both sides of the aisle. There's issues with mail getting lost and mail, sorting the mail. Are you open to any type of privatization, any type of pilot projects or anything like that with different facets of the Postal Service? I know we privatize the logistics of the mail, but are there other areas of privatization that you would be open to, partnerships and things like that?
So first of all, with Congress and administration asked me to have a discussion about initiatives, as I did in the first administration when I came in, and the next administration that came in, and this administration, and all the Congresses, I will work with you to understand what it is that you want us to consider, and I will work very hard to either identify that we could do it or to say that it's just not going to work for us. Let me say, when I came in, we had 500 different places with contractors, our people, and so forth, doing random things, okay, in terms of how to process that. I have to get that down to 225 fully functional operations with high precision. I think I can do that. Okay, but we have a lot of rules and a lot of critique and resistance. I just want to move 5% of the local canceled mail, 5% of the mail from 60 locations into a major sorting centers close by, so we can handle that. I had like 20 senators stop me.
Right, I understand.
I had
I know, they all called me. They all called me.
Calling me about what mail machine I was moving out of a plant.
Right, and I know that. Believe me, I know that. I can't go to the bathroom without a senator or representative stopping me and giving me a postal horror story. But at the end of where we are now, do you think your reorganization plan's working? Do you think that we're going to improve performance and cut our losses? I mean, the goal of the Postal Service is to break even, and we're not doing that.
We no longer have a monopoly. We have an obligation. We have $39 billion.
I know as much about it.
It costs us $75 billion to deliver it. I have to reduce the $75 billion to 70 or something. I have to grow our package business. I got to move everything together. That is the deal. I think that we can be vibrant. We can serve the American people. We can cover a lot of our cost, okay? And then we could look at things in the Congress that I have $10 billion of unfunded mandates, things that you require us to do that cost us money.
Well, in our postal reform bill that we passed in a bipartisan manner out of this committee, which became law, we provided funding, and we changed a lot of the liability obligations that you had, and we've tried to help the Postal Service. And it's been disappointing.
Yeah,
The
but you
losses.
also mandated that we deliver to 167
I
million addresses
understand.
6 days a week. Do you know what kind of cost that is? Mandating?
I do. But again, if there's a way that we can make this thing break even, if there's something legislatively that we can do, I'm more than willing to try to help with that. But the days of bailouts and handouts are over. I mean, the American people spoke loud and clear. And as I said, I jumped in on Mr. Palmer's questions. I worry about that EV money sitting around, that it may be clawed back. I think there are lots of areas where there's going to be significant reform over the next 4 years, and there are, I'm just, I'm on your side. I'm the advocate. My grandmother spent her career as a mail carrier in Ribble and Spring, Tennessee. I am on the side of the post office, but I'm telling you, there are lots of ideas that I don't know whether they'd be advantageous or not to the Postal Service, but there are a lot of ideas out there about significant changes, and I hope that you're given an opportunity to implement these reforms. The problem is with the losses, and I'm over. I gave Mr. Raskin 2.5 minutes extra, and I'm going to ask one more question to the Inspector General. Ms. Hull, in light of the losses this year and projected losses next year, does the Office of Inspector General have any ideas or solutions as to how we can limit the losses or even get to the objective of trying to break even?
We've done some work, particularly in our research area, where we've identified where some of the costly obligations that I spoke of earlier relate to the Postal Service, particularly around the retirement funds in that area. We're also doing some research work that should come out, I think, in the spring or early summer on other posts around the world. The problems the Postal Service has experienced are not specific to the United States. Posts around the world have struggled.
Well, are postal rates too cheap? Is that anything that you thought about? I mean, are they too expensive, and that's limiting the I mean, these are questions you all need to look into if you haven't.
Yeah, we did.
And if an obligation for retirement, obviously that's a huge expense, a huge liability. Should we be hiring more people at the Postal Service? I mean, are there private sector solutions? These are things the IG's office needs to look at. And again, I'll say this: this committee has jurisdiction over the Inspector General. I have found there are good Inspector Generals, there are average IGs, and there are poor IGs. And we're trying to work with the new administration on identifying which is which. And so we need the IGs to work with us, because finally this town is fixing to get serious about being more efficient. So we'll be in communication with that.
Definitely.
My time's expired.
Look forward to meeting with your staff on that.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask you that you piqued my interest with the comment about the IGs. Is that something that we're going to do as a committee, looking at the different IGs?
I mean, if I keep up with your correspondence and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if there are issues with IGs, we can certainly talk about it. I mean, there are, I think there are good IGs. Just as I said, there are bad IGs, and there are some IGs that have never been given information that they've requested, like the SIGI.
Yeah.
Like the cigar IG.
Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to hear it, and I would love to participate in that with you. I know our members are very interested in making sure we get the good ones to stay.
All right. Chair recognizes Ms. Presley.
Thank you. The United States Postal Service is much more than a delivery system. It is a lifeline. People depend on it for medications, checks, ballots, and much more. But Mr. DeJoy, your leadership has placed this lifeline at risk. Your decisions to diminish services and consolidate processing plants have had devastating impacts on my constituents in the Massachusetts 7th. One constituent from Somerville reports missing checks and legal documents, describing how she repeatedly contacted USPS only to have her cases closed with false assurances. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this constituent letter from May 2024.
Without objection, so ordered.
Another constituent in Grove Hall waited for time-sensitive letters regarding her Social Security disability benefits that never arrived. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this constituent letter from August 2024.
Without objection, so ordered.
These are not isolated incidents. More than 80 Roxbury residents signed a letter to my office regarding the understaffed local post office. Here is an excerpt. It's common for customers to have to wait 30 to 45 minutes for service, and frequently no one is at any of the windows. The building often feels abandoned. They go on to describe delivery services and issues. Mail service in the surrounding zip codes has been similarly terrible for years now. Despite truly wonderful mail carriers, we frequently experience issues such as mail delays of 2 to 4 weeks, lost mail, misdelivered mail, and mail left outside of mailboxes. One constituent even reported being unable to pay their rent due to the delivery of a late Social Security check. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this constituent letter from April 2024.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. DeJoy, maybe if Congress should pass a law that forces you to receive all your income and prescriptions via postal mail. Would you think it acceptable to have to wait a month or more to pay your bills or to take your medication, yes or no? Do you think it's acceptable, yes or no?
I don't think it's acceptable.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just curious, having listened to your testimony earlier today, and since you agree this is not an acceptable cadence of service, what grade would you give yourself?
I would give myself an A.
Okay, I vigorously disagree with that assessment.
I knew you would.
I would certainly give you a failing grade. What immediate actions will you take to restore reliable services in communities like Roxbury, Grove Hall, and Hyde Park, and Somerville in my district?
Well, in terms of general actions, it's the same actions and efforts that I have taken since I walked in the door here 4 years ago to try and improve the Postal Service. My staff will take down the names of the cities you asked about, and I will look into them specifically.
All right. During unannounced visits to Roxbury and Grove Hall branches, I want to transition into workforce for a moment. I saw firsthand that workers are demoralized and under-resourced, leaving communities underserved. I'm grateful to the American Postal Workers Union for raising the alarm on this and standing up for their members. On your watch, Mr. DeJoy, the USPS has been undermined across the board and even prompted audits of postal operations throughout Boston neighborhoods. Ms. Hull, after complaints from my office and others in the Massachusetts delegation, the Office of the Inspector General, in fact, launched an investigation. I look forward to reading that forthcoming report on these audits. In the meantime, how can my constituents, who continue to struggle unjustly with USPS services, when they have concerns around where should they communicate? Via hotline, a website, or other means?
Yeah, our hotline is definitely open and available. We get a number of hotline complaints, probably this last year about 350,000 complaints. We use those complaints. We obviously can't respond to every single one, but we use data analytics very effectively to identify hotspots around the country.
What is the hotline?
Our hotline, you can go to our website at uspsoig.gov, and there's a hotline form. All those complaints come in, and we look at all of them using data analytics to identify where hotspots are occurring, and use that to inform where we do audit work and investigative work as well.
All right, thank you very much. You know, it is, in fact, the collective action of my constituents and those from communities across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that brought attention to these issues, and I'm proud to stand alongside them. And Mr. DeJoy will keep the pressure up until we see a restoration of equitable, reliable services, because every community deserves exactly that. Thank you, and I yield back.
Chair, now recognize Mr. Clyde from Georgia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for waving me on. I appreciate that very much. Postmaster General DeJoy, I'm not here to blast you. okay? I'm here to try to make things better as best we possibly can. But first, I want to talk about a little bit of frustration that have come from the folks in my district, and so you'll just have to bear with me just a moment, sir. All right. As you can see in this chart behind me, when the consolidation of the Palmetto facility in Georgia occurred, postal delivery rates went from over 80% down to 36%, and now up, as of July, the last data I personally have, we're now up at about 76%. So from the bottom at 36%, you know, going up to 76%, that's a 40% increase, and thank you for putting resources into that effort. We highlighted it, and it's getting better. I appreciate that. Back in August, I wrote a letter to you when things were still not where they should be, and it talked about the Postal Regulatory Commission and the fact that in this entire consolidation effect or effort, we hadn't seen the post office reach out to the PRC to get an advisory opinion. Now, I will tell you that my letter went to you directly on August the 13th, okay? By chance, did you read that letter?
I don't remember, sir.
Okay, all right.
A lot of letters.
Well, I will commend you on this. We got a reply on August the 22nd. I don't think any agency has ever replied to Congress that quickly, and so thank you for that. Now, my concern, though, is that the person who actually signed the letter, the reply, was Mr. Scott Kennedy, the government relations representative, and not yourself. I would much have preferred your signature on this response, but it talks about acknowledging that a Postal Regulatory Commission advisory opinion was not sought, okay, and that they would be doing that going forward. Do you find, I mean, is a Postal Regulatory Commission opinion, is that important to the post office?
It's required.
Yes, it is. You're right.
We think we're going to have some significant changes in service on a national basis.
Okay.
This was not intended to be a significant change of service, as consequential as it became locally, but even such, it was not on a national basis. It would not. I put a $500 million plant in Georgia. We had 10. I have 18,000 workers in Georgia that work in some of the worst facilities I've ever seen in my life, and I've been in a lot of places around the world looking at facilities. And this is what we intended to try and fix.
Mm-hmm.
And we had significant issues unrelated to the plant, and it was awful. I agree. But in the long run, we will have great service in all of Georgia because we're touching 6 or 7 different plants down there.
Okay. Do most post offices still have a slot that say local mail only, and is that mail itself processed at that post office for local delivery?
No post offices actually, other than an election and extraordinary measures. All mail that's collected at post offices go to someplace else to be processed.
Okay, all right. This is a text message from one of my constituents directly to me, and it says, is there anyone in your group of folks that can put a knot in the tail of the Postal Service about the poorest possible service being provided to us? I cannot get a bill paid or bills received on my end on time for anything in the world. He says, I'm not sure what the issue is. We and many others around here get our bills late. Our payments we make don't show up to the places we mail to, and we personally get rent checks that are mailed to us from across town that will show up a month late. It's absolutely terrible. Not just a small issue, but huge. Even our tax commissioner said to pay taxes online because of the issues with the mail. All right, and so I'm trying to figure out a way that local mail can be delivered locally where it doesn't take a month to get local mail. And I would like your input as to how we can make sure that happens.
Georgia has had, especially in the Atlanta area, has had the worst service in the Postal Service for many, 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 many years, which is one of the reasons why we chose to, it was a growing state, we chose to put the significant investment in this particular area. As part of this transition, we're having problems, but we're also cleaning up a lot of those types of things that were happening in these 10 separate facilities and so forth. We are very committed. I am very committed to getting, Georgia, all these locations to follow the service standards that we're seeking now to change, because the service standards that we have are not achievable for the dollars that we have to spend. And in fact, I think they're kind of ridiculous. We're making requests that will, and my expectation is that we will have reliable mail service in the area, and we will also have improved retail operations with expanded services in the retail centers that we have, throughout the nation. This is a big makeover, both not only in terms of facilities and infrastructure, in terms of schedules and how we route mail and so forth, and even in the expectations of our people. We did things very randomly. Now we're asking everyone to work a specific function in a specific manner, to a specific schedule, to a specific productivity rate. That is a big change to put on an organization.
Thank you for that. I personally visited the Postal Center in Palmetto, and I saw the plan of all the various different multiple postal offices or postal buildings consolidated into one. But look forward to working with the Postal Service to make sure that it meets that statutory requirement up here of 93%. Thank you, sir, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about CARS, cons, concepts of a plan, and compensation. I'm going to actually start with the cons. There has been mention of DOGE and how that is going to come into play. And I'm curious to know, just yes or no, Inspector General Hull, quick question. Have you found that if the post office was to cut its workforce by 75%, that would somehow fix all of the problems within the post office? Yes or no?
No, we've not done any work in that area like that.
Thank you. Postmaster DeJoy, are you anticipating that a 75% cut in your workforce would solve all of the problems of the post office? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. So it's interesting because my colleagues seem to be so excited because there's a new sheriff in town, and the co-sheriffs of the DOGE committee, more specifically, Mr. Ramaswamy, has actually proposed cutting 75% of our federal workforce to try to rein in some of the spending. Now, I want to talk about cars because cars have been discussed a lot as well as it relates to spending. And I want to know from you, Postmaster General, can you tell me approximately what is the lifespan of one of your postal vehicles? And I know you have various vehicles, so let me just say the letter carrier vehicles that they drive.
Letter carriers have a few different vehicles. Commercial off-the-shelf vehicles will last us 6-7 years.
Okay.
The special purpose built vehicles that we had, the LLVs that we had were supposed to last 20. We're using them 30. Our new vehicles that we're buying, a special purpose vehicle, we expect to last longer than 20 years or longer.
Okay. So as we are comparing the various costs, and there's been a lot of conversation about the fact that there are electric vehicles, and it's my understanding that the electric vehicles are the ones that now have air conditioning, correct?
All the vehicles now have air
Okay.
conditioning, but yes.
Earlier it was brought up, and the reason that I care so deeply about the vehicle situation is that my constituent, Eugene Gates, was brought up earlier, who lost his life. This was somebody who did not need extra hours of training on how to properly hydrate because this was someone who dedicated almost 40 years of his life to the post office. The reality is that the working conditions were not working. That's just the reality. This is someone who had done this job for so long. And I'm going to be honest, and I know that your office has received letters from us regarding Mr. Gates, but I am concerned, as my colleague, Mr. Kassar, laid out, that we still haven't figured out how to modernize and make sure that the working environment is going to work for our post postal employees. So for instance, as you are rolling out these new vehicles, have you decided on a way to prioritize where these vehicles are going to go? And does that overlap with the areas in which we know, say, experience the most extreme heat conditions, such as in places like Texas? Have they been prioritized?
Yeah, so we're not filling the whole need, right? So there is a process of replacement of vehicles that.
Let me, and I'm gonna have to cut you because I've got to get to a few more things and I'm running out of time. So I'm just curious, are we prioritizing? Even if it means that you're gonna swap out, let's say the vehicles aren't necessarily up for being swapped out in Texas, but we know that in another area, they don't experience the extreme heat, so we move those vehicles, those areas, and make sure that the vehicles that are going to keep our postal employees safe are put into those areas that they're needed the most. Has that been a consideration?
We consider, a lot of the country gets heat, and.
I understand. We get extreme heat, is what I'm saying.
I will get you the process. I would say that it would not satisfy you to see that just Texas is getting any special difference. We have a bunch of procedures that and plans that strategies that we had to deploy vehicles. Let me get those for you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
As it relates to delivering for America, it feels as if it's more a concept of a plan than an actual plan because, as you've stated earlier in your testimony, you had projections, and clearly those projections were completely off. But even as I've had my team, as we've sat here, really comb through and make sure that we didn't miss it, delivering for America, correct me if I'm wrong, does it deal with drones at all?
No.
Okay. So when we're talking about modernizing, do you not believe that it would be incumbent upon your organization to consider something like drones? Because as I've stated before, not only do I currently represent urban Dallas, Texas area, but I lived in East Texas. And I know what it looks like when you're trying to deliver, say, in rural America. And I know that there are other organizations that are doing things such as drone deliveries, which number one, if you don't have the workforce that you need, it is very helpful. Number two, it's a lot more efficient because now you're talking about homes that are separated so far. And as you've heard from some of my colleagues in rural America talking about the delivery problems, I don't know how we can talk about modernization of any part of federal government and not talk about drones. We talk about it when we're talking about the border. We talk about it when we're talking about our military. And I'm just asking that if we are going to talk about a plan that really is looking at modernization, we look at something like drones, especially if DOGE gets their way and they start to get rid of some of your workforce, this potentially would be something that you would need. And the final thing that I have to say, I know I'm a little over, but I'm just asking for a little bit of leeway, is on the compensation piece. I will be honest with you and tell you that before walking in today, I was completely unaware of the fact that your compensation was so high. All I know is that as it was laid out before, your compensation has gone up approximately 17% since you've been in this post, and you consider yourself to have a grade A. I'm just curious to know, on average, when we look at our postal workers, such as workers like my constituent Eugene, who had been with the post office and literally gave his life of service to the post office, and he had been there for almost 40 years, on average, are we seeing that there's an increase in compensation to the tune of approximately 17% in the same time span as you've been with the post office for the average postal employee?
I think that over the last 4 years, and I mean, I don't know that it's a relevant comparison, but I think wages have gone up about 15%.
Okay. And my final question, really quickly,
But,
is that...
look, I'm sorry, Ms. Crockett, you've gone 2.5 minutes over. We'll let you submit that.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. McCormick from Georgia.
Thank you, Chair. It's very kind of you to bring me on to this committee today to ask some very tough questions on a tough situation that we have right now. My home state is Georgia, last in services rendered right now. I know you know that we dropped below 40% on time, and we're now up to 75%, which is kind of an achievement, but nowhere close to where we need to be. My personal experience in the last year is I had 2 certified letters. one to me from my tax returns from 2 miles away, certified, that took 4 months and a congressional inquiry to make it to my house. 4 months, certified. The other one, I sent a letter to approximately 11 miles away to an address I've sent plenty of things to. I certified it because I was worried about it. Worried about it because that was a check made out to somebody else, certified. The due date came and went. I went down to the post office, asked, where's my letter? They didn't know. And then when it finally came back to me as undeliverable to this address, which they can't explain still, I got charged $6 for a letter to be certified that couldn't be delivered. And there's no explanation. When I asked to see management, I said they can explain it to me. They didn't have time for me. I came back later, I said, can I speak to them as a congressman to try to help them fix this problem? You know what the response was? We don't have time. I'm glad you took time to be with me today, because I want to address this from a personal and a non-personal issue. When you talk about the future of the post office, I used to, as a little kid, literally say the post office is the one part of the government that I trust. On-time deliveries, they don't lose stuff. In the last 4 years, your reputation has destroyed that. On your watch. Destroyed that. Businesses, almost every single business I know that wants to send a check out won't use the U.S. Postal Service anymore. I won't use the U.S. Postal Service anymore. That's on your watch. The two major decisions I've seen you make, which is on the distribution centers and on employee hiring, have done nothing to mitigate this in real-time ways. I don't understand why you give yourself an A grade, as you just stated, when it comes to the delivery. We have, I want to read this into the record, Mr. Chair. This is a letter from the entire Georgia delegation.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. And your response, which I appreciate the response from your staff. But when you talk about, I went down and talked to, well, I tried to talk to my local postmaster, couldn't get a hold of him, even when I stood there and said, just tell me when I can, I'll leave my number. Have him call me back. Never called me back. That's your environment that you fostered in Georgia and other places in the country. And it's not isolated to just Georgia either, by the way. I know businesses in California that will not use the U.S. Postal Service because of theft, real-time theft. It's never been, your reputation is done. Whether you admit it or not, in the military, if I have a skipper who things are going bad for, they're a good military officer, but you know what we do when things go wrong repeatedly? We relieve them. You know what you do when a CEO repeatedly fails and the business model falls apart and nobody wants to use that business anymore and it becomes non-profitable? You fire them. You know what we do in government when organizations fail over and over and over again and become unaccountable and are not going the right direction and have actually ruined the very business model that you seem to hold as a standard? Because you're not going to expand Postal Service when you have a reputation for not delivering on time, not keeping the mail accountable on your watch. You, sir, do not get an A grade. You cannot give yourself that grade.
I just did.
You can't. You can't
did.
grade your own paper, sir. I've been to medical school.
Well, then-
I got my MBA. You can't. I'm sorry. You were graded by the United States people, and they don't use your service anymore. You bankrupt.
That is not true.
You
That is
bankrupt
not
this
true,
through
sir.
your
My
reputation
business is
only.
growing.
Through your
Our
reputation,
business is growing.
you are responsible for the fall of the Postal Service
Now,
and the
this
lack of
Congress-
accountability.
This Congress is responsible for the
doesn't-
fall of the Postal
so it's
Service.
Congress's-
I am trying to fix
On
the
your
Postal
watch,
Service.
with all the AI.
Before my watch, the same stuff
With
happened.
all
worse.
the AI, with all the computer systems, you're worse than if I took
You're
a
talking
horse
to yourself
and picked up the mail and delivered it 2 miles down the road. That's you. I hope you got that on camera. This is the response that the Postmaster just gave Congress when he doesn't like what he hears. Literally covered his ears and gave himself the grade of A. And with that, sir, I rest.
Good.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Mfume from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member for getting us to this point. Mr. DeJoy, good to see you again. I think the first time we sat across from one another like this was 4 years ago. And one of the colleagues on the committee that day said, why does he want this job? I didn't have an answer then. I really don't have an answer now, except that if you believe you can do something, you try to do it, and if you can't, you fail, and everything else takes care of itself. I was the first one to call for your resignation 4 years ago, and your supporters were the first to call for my resignation. So the fact that we're still here, I think, says something. I don't know what it says, but we're here. Couple quick things. Your very first predecessor, Benjamin Franklin, was the first postmaster. He said in his first comments to the country that when the post offices are closed, people will suffer. It was true then, it's true now, and remarkably, over all those many years, the Postal Service has retained a 90% approval rating. That's according to the last Pew poll, which was done in 2020. Unfortunately, since then, that rating or favorability rating has declined somewhat. And, you know, it's interesting that the post office is actually older than the country, 1775. So what you hear today, and I think what you heard over on the Senate side the other day, is an effort for a lot of representatives and I guess senators to express what we hear a lot of times and what we try to do about it when we get an opportunity to talk to you. Now, I didn't come here with gloom and doom. I want to say that I've been very active in interacting with your office. Whenever we have a problem, I'm on the phone. I've got a staff person. We've got letters going out. And fortunately, we got a real good postmaster for the city of Baltimore, LaGreta Goodwin. Don't know if you know her or not. She's doing a hell of a job, conscientious, very responsive, and tries every day not to be perfect, but to help us in that city get closer to perfection. I mean, they got and had several post office job fairs over the summer. There's a lot of interaction. There's an actual council that involves local private business and government that she heads up that I think is the right way to go. It's the right model. Let me just say that. One thing that I want to talk about that I absolutely support, and then I've got several questions that I'm going to ask that you find a way to have someone on your staff to get back to me about, because there's not enough time in these short windows to answer difficult questions. But I want to make sure that I'm on the record again that I support the conversion to electronic vehicles. I mean, we've got 230,000 postal vehicles. And I believe, because of the carbon footprint that those vehicles alone are responsible for, that we have an obligation as a government to try to find a way to reduce emissions. Now, I don't force that on anybody. I think the government is wrong when it mandates that you, him, and her, as consumers, have to buy electronic vehicles. I would never do that. But the government is a consumer. So yes, I think the government has a larger responsibility, which is why that $3 billion was included in the Inflation Reduction Act, so that you would have the money to be able to start the conversions. And whether it's 90% or 70%, as was argued earlier, I think that's up to you with the direction of Congress. And one of the things you didn't say was that you started out the way we mandated, and then we said, no, change this, and how come you're not doing that? So there's a lot of finger-pointing going around. I just want, for the record, to know that these vehicles are important, and I don't know how you undo contracts. I wouldn't want to be in your position where you've let so many contracts and now people are telling you to go and change those. If you, sir, could do me a favor and get back to me on 3 issues that, as I said, we don't have time for now, unfortunately. Robberies. I am so sick and tired of postal delivery persons being robbed at gunpoint and knife point, being chased with bats, because we've got fools and clowns out here who are breaking the law, who want the arrow key, because they know if they get the arrow key, they can open all these multi-boxes and they can steal. They steal from the poor, they go to high-end communities, they steal, and they have no concern for the life or the safety of those postal delivery persons, men and women that have been beat up and assaulted across this country. And what concerns me is that it's increasing. I'm also concerned about the increase in the forever stamp, because that stamp started out as a way of people to be able to save money. You purchase at this price, it's good forever, and you are free of the price increases that tend to come about in the interim. So it's very concerning, particularly since we've had 6 increases in 2 years. And the final thing that I really would hope that I can get some response, but also kind of cooperation with myself and maybe with other members of Congress, are these thefts that occur that affect senior citizens, where their Social Security checks are being stolen, where their mail is being delivered late, when they respond to pay a bill and charged a late fee, not because they've done anything at all, but because of the delivery systems back and forth, and the theft of medicine that so many senior citizens rely on through the mail. Those are important issues that I would like to believe affect all of us. I know they're on your desk. Your staff has been fortunate in I think, finding a way to get back to myself and others with at least some semblance of what's going on. And so all that you hear today being expressed from all of us is a lot of frustration, but there are things that are to be pointed to, as I did a moment ago, that where there is progress, that progress ought to be highlighted. So I don't know if we'll see each other 4 years again from now, sitting across like this, or if that things may have changed. But I do want to thank you for coming here, and I get back to that original question, why does he want this job? Because I remembered what it was like 4 years ago when you walked in the door, and you're going to catch hell because you're not God and you can't fix everything overnight. But understand that the frustrations are real frustrations from the people on this committee, Democrats and Republicans, who want to get back to that 90% approval rating when Americans trusted the Postal Service more than any other fixture of government. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the time.
Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, I spoke with the USPS in January of this year and wrote a letter to you in February expressing serious concerns with the transfer of mail operations from the Buffalo Processing and Distribution Center to the Northwest Rochester Processing and Distribution Center. My constituents and I shared serious concerns about USPS's claims that these operational changes will enhance on-time delivery rates and reduce delivery times. Simply put, forcing mail sent to and from addresses in Buffalo, New York to be processed through the Rochester Processing and Distribution Center over an hour and a half away introduces numerous opportunities for delay. As expected, your test sites in Atlanta, in Houston, Richmond, Virginia, they all reported delays, with USPS attributing them to bad weather and other factors. Mr. DeJoy, Western New York is no stranger to severe weather, especially in our winter months as we're experiencing now, which frequently disrupts travel. Just last week, a snowstorm shut down parts of the New York State Thruway and led to travel bans and advisories throughout Erie and Chautauqua counties. My constituents are rightfully worried that under your modernization plan, they will not receive their critical medications, their important packages, or even bills on time. So, Mr. DeJoy, considering the frequent severe weather disruptions in regions like Western New York, what specific changes or improvements are you planning to implement under your modernization plan to ensure timely mail delivery, especially during adverse weather conditions?
So with regard to the transfer of the mail processing, the outgoing mail processing from Buffalo to Rochester, that was a totally different process that we went on in Richmond and Atlanta. Atlanta and Richmond were completely built new plants and a consolidation of a bunch of local operations. We have since announcing that looked at the whole, there was like 60 plants that were in this cancellation, moving of canceling outgoing mail. We have gone about it a different way now and filed a 3661 to deal with the mail differently. And some of these plants we're not going to move the original cancellation, and Buffalo happens to be one of them. So that mail will stay in Buffalo, and we're going to deploy other practices to aggregate and consolidate mail, outgoing mail So you will still receive that local turnaround cancellation.
Yeah, I am grateful that that plan was scrapped, but it was of great concern. My constituents aren't just worried about the absurdity of local mail traveling hundreds of miles to reach a destination perhaps 2 miles away. They're also alarmed by your plan to outfit the Postal Service's fleet of electric vehicles. Mr. DeJoy, this may not be an electric vehicle hearing, but let's be clear. Sending electric mail delivery vehicles to rural communities, which I represent, in the dead of winter is a disaster waiting to happen. You're going to leave my constituents stranded without their mail when these vehicles break down in freezing temperatures, and worse, you'll end up spending more on gas-powered rescue vehicles to save them. So nevertheless, the Post Office received federal funding for electric vehicles and charging stations throughout through the Inflation Reduction Act. Do you plan to maintain a fleet of gasoline-powered vehicles to service rural routes?
We have extensive studies with regard to the temperature deviations that we can withstand. And there's a relatively small portion of our routes, I think 20% or less, that we would not put these vehicles in. We look at every route with regard to whether it needs four-wheel drive or two-wheel drive, whether it can use a left-hand drive or a right-hand drive. So we have diagnostics on every single route in the country, and we will use that information appropriately to deploy the type of vehicle that we deploy. And we have many emergency backup procedures that are put in all of our locations. So I think I'm pretty certain that we will deploy these vehicles, and they will be more effective than the old vehicles that we have that are breaking down every place.
Boy, I hope you're right. I want to use my remaining time here to discuss a district-related issue. The town of Woodhull, New York, a very small rural town in my district with a large Amish community, has been waiting for over 3 years for the post office to reopen. Unfortunately, extreme weather during the aftermath of Hurricane Debbie, the community was once again flooded, brings this to light, the people of Woodhull and what the sacrifices and the burdens that they have been stressed with over the last 3 years. Do you have any updates on the Woodhull, New York Post Office, and will you commit to working with me to ensure my constituents in Woodhull that they can get their post office reopened?
Yes, I do not have an update. I can get you an update, and I will work with you. We have we have these situations where we lease most of our post offices, and when issues happen, there's probably too much negotiation that goes on to get the post offices opening, and that's something that
3 years is a completely unacceptable timeline.
It happens, I know.
Well,
all over the place.
But you, sir, can fix it.
And we'll look at it.
And I'm going to hold your feet to the fire on that, because this is unacceptable. That these people have been without a post office, having to travel 20 miles to go to their nearest post office. It's been 3 years, and we've got nothing but the runaround from the USPS. And enough is enough. You know, you're supposed to bring business principles into the Postal Service. This is unacceptable to my constituents. And all of my colleagues here understand the importance of the U.S. Postal Service. Our constituents rely on the USPS to run as efficiently as possible, and I hope that USPS is doing everything in its power to ensure that all Americans receive their mail in a timely and efficient manner. And I really hope that you'll take some of what I had to say into account. Thank you, and I yield back.
Chairman, a gentleman yields back. Before I recognize Mr. Tlaib, I think Mr. Mfume has a request.
Yeah, I have a unanimous consent request, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, I wrote you back in June. I'm sorry that I didn't bring this up earlier, requesting assistance of UPS for the Parent J. Mitchell Postal Building. It's a facility that has been standing since 1966 in dire need of repair, expansion, or relocation. And it's the gateway out of Baltimore City into Baltimore County. So it's a January or June 27th letter. I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, that it be entered.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you again, and thank Mr. DeJoy.
Chair now recognize Mr. Tlaib.
Thank you so much. It's not just, of course, our Amish neighbors, but it's even communities like the city of Detroit. And if you can, Postmaster General, I don't know if you have a pen on you or anything. Can you write down this? It's called Joy Field Station in Detroit. Everybody, great. Everybody's writing it down. It's been years that I have been, trying to have you all move with urgency about the lack of staffing, the fact that my residents are getting mail every other day, there. And again, I don't think it's because our workers there are not working hard enough. I really think it's some of the changes that have been happening. And also, kind of to piggyback, I think one of my colleagues mentioned about how to actually put complaints forward and where does it go. It's changed. And it's really become very much a struggle for many of my residents that rely on the Postal Service. So Joyfield Station, please, we need to talk about what's going on there. Postmaster DeJoy, what is universal service obligation? What is that?
Well, it's undefined, relatively undefined.
No, I think it's already set by Congress, right?
A long time ago.
Yeah, well, it's still law of the land. So it's actually binding standards for prompt, reliable, affordable services, correct?
As I said, undefined.
Yeah, no, it's pretty defined. If you want, I can get the law, get the standard for you. But it's actually part of your job to know what that is. So my question then is, what are we doing to fulfill the universal service obligations under the U.S. Postal Service?
Everything. Right? First of all, the recent legislation put into the universal service obligation, as far as I see it, delivering to 167 million addresses 6 days a week. We are investing. We've committed over $15 billion into repairing the horrible conditions that we had, equipping our facilities, equipping our carriers.
I understand. Postmaster General, it's very rare when you see both sides of the aisle in this committee actually agreeing.
I don't think when it concerns the Postal
It's still
Service.
delayed. There's issues, but I'm telling you, it's delayed. People are seeing some of the changes with your 10-year plan actually result in some really extreme cases where folks are not getting their mail. But it's really important. So yes or no, will your 10-year plan lead to closures of any more of the postal facilities that our constituents rely on? How many more?
Well,
I know you closed
I have not closed any retail centers.
Did you close 200 mail processing plants?
I have not closed 200 mail processing.
200 mail processing plants you did not close?
No, I didn't do that.
Okay, let me tell you, what is this about 200? So are you planning to close 200?
I'm planning to open bigger buildings and consolidate.
What they call the mega plants? This is important for my colleagues. So 60 mega plants that you want to do?
We'll have 60 regional processing and distribution centers and about 170 local processing and distribution centers across the nation, and we're closing about 180 annexes that did random things around the country.
Yeah, so I read I don't know, somewhere in Wyoming, did you hear about this? Where they have to go as far as like Denver to get their packages if they weren't home, and the Postal Service came to their door, knock, knock, they weren't home, they have to travel 45 minutes away to go get their package? Not aware of that.
Not aware of that.
Okay.
Post offices all over Wyoming.
I understand. Something is happening, though. General DeJoy.
Something had been happening
DeJoy,
for 20 years.
Postmaster DeJoy, I know I've only been here 6 years. I've never gotten this many complaints about our Postal Service until you became in charge. Okay. And trust me, I know our chairman and some other my colleagues are seeing the same thing. Not only are they directly impacted, but our constituents are obviously feeling the same changes. It's really important. This is an important question, and Inspector, I may ask you the same. Can you tell me the total cost of non-compliance with the American Postal Workers and Letter Carriers Union contracts? How much has it cost us in some of the non-compliance actions?
More than it should have, but that's been going
how
on
much?
for a long. I don't know off the top of my head.
This is Oversight Committee. You got to be. How much? Do you know, Inspector? How much did it cost us, that Postmaster DeJoy's leadership, in non-compliance in union contracts?
I don't know the answer to that, but we are going to be doing an audit into that area upcoming this year.
What is it, like 5 million? What is it?
It's in the millions.
It's in the millions?
But it's been in the millions for a long time.
DeJoy, at the beginning, the postal workers were like, okay, we see what you're going to try to do with this 10-year plan, yes or no? And then they changed their mind because they said, they're not in support of you. I don't know what you were saying. They actually passed a resolution calling for your resignation. Did you know that?
When?
The American Postal Workers, if I may submit it for the record, Mr. Chair, AFPWU, American Postal Workers Union Convention, adopts a resolution to remove Postmaster General DeJoy, September 16, 2022. Would you like me to get you the resolution, Mr.?
I don't think they renewed that request in their last
Can I?
meeting.
Can I send you this?
You can send it to me. I'm
Who
aware.
do you think many of us are talking to? We're talking to the workers. We're talking to our neighbors.
And I've talked to the workers also.
Yeah, they said, quote, because of delayed mail and undermined public confidence in the Postal Service, verbatim from that resolution. Postmaster DeJoy, you don't
I have
have,
7 unions.
I understand that.
That was one.
But Postmaster DeJoy, we're not making this up. You're making it out like members of Congress. There's too many of us that
Well,
are telling you
I'm
the
not-
same
I'm not
thing.
saying that
And
you're making
honestly,
it up,
it's
but I'm
not
saying how
political because
relevant
guess what? Both Republicans and Democrats are giving you the same stories.
Well, I say Republicans and Democrats are significantly responsible for the condition of the United States Postal Service when I arrived here.
Well, maybe
These-
it's
these
because you
things have been
don't know the
manifesting
answer.
themselves over the
Maybe
last
it's
20
because you
years.
don't know the answers. We're asking you questions. You don't even know how much in 2024 through the grievance abrasion tracking system. How many complaints have you had in the grievance tracking system? How many? Really important to know. Like how many grievances have been filed under your leadership?
Department. I interact with my unions all the time.
But you can't say they're in support of you. You don't even know how many grievances were filed. I'll leave it at this because you thank you, Mr. Chair, for being generous at this time. I called for this hearing, and I told the chairman, this is one area that impacts all of our districts, every corner of our country. Every part of our country is impacted by this, literally, the Postal Service. We got to do better. You are a public servant. You're not in the private sector anymore, Postmaster DeJoy. You have a higher standard. The public relies on you making the right decision. And please, for the love of God,
As they do you.
for the love of God, put the universal service obligations in your office. Print it out. That is literally supposed to be your guidance to the standard. Thank you. I yield.
Gentlelady yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Frost.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Mr. DeJoy, as I'm sure you know, I want to talk about cluster boxes. Cluster boxes, they resemble P.O. boxes at our local post office. Sometimes we see apartment complexes use them, where I live uses them as well. I know that USPS sometimes encourages communities to install cluster boxes. Mr. DeJoy, can you tell me more about how you decide when you encourage a community to use cluster boxes? What factors are considered? Does the recommendation just go through you or the local postmaster? Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, so rules were established, I think, 15 years ago with regard to home delivery, that any new developments, and that's a wishy-washy definition as to what a new development is, because we often get into conflicts with an expansion of an old development, whether it's a new development or not, that we would not be going to the doorstep. We would put cluster boxes in, that there'd be a requirement that the developer put the cluster box in for the new developments. And that's been an organizational business rule for at least 15 years, I believe.
Thank you. Ms. Hull, your office helps to make sure USPS is doing its job properly. Have y'all provided any kind of oversight, or do you know of any oversight that happens with the cluster boxes and the requests that go to communities on these?
We have not done that in a while, I don't believe. We've done some work probably 5-6 years ago in that area, but I don't know that we've done anything really recently.
I think it would be good to look into this, especially looking at patterns. The reason I ask is I have 2 communities in my district, Richmond Heights and Carver Shores. These neighborhoods have virtually no apartment complexes, yet they are being asked to consider cluster boxes. My neighbors in Central Florida and myself were concerned that the more wealthy suburbs of my district that are also spread out are not being asked to consider cluster boxes. And I bet you can guess what the demographic is of these 2 neighborhoods. These are predominantly black neighborhoods in my district. The Orlando Postmaster has been completely non-responsive to us in our office, reaching out multiple times to ask why these 2 traditionally black neighborhoods with pretty much no apartment complexes are being considered for cluster boxes, so people have to walk out of their damn house to go to the box to go get their mail. I think we need to get together and talk about it. Obviously we can't get a meeting with the Orlando Postmaster, so I want to ask both of you if you can commit to meeting with me on cluster boxes.
Sure, we're happy to.
You too. Mr.
She
DeJoy?
said we. We're
Oh, we? Okay. All right. Well, she speaks for you there. All right.
Myself.
That's why I didn't answer.
Yes or no, Mr. Joy? Can we meet? Okay. I think we need to get together on this because it's important. The USPS is supposed to be delivering for America, and I want to make sure we're thinking about people like Richmond Heights and Carver Shores. I want to turn to delivery for rural communities. I have a community, an unincorporated community of Bithlo in my district. As I understand it, the standard operating procedure is for mobile home communities is to either have a park office or manager distribute the mail to residents if there are not proper mailing addresses or clear delivery points. Ms. Hull, in 2022, your office looked into undelivered and partial routes. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer for the record the report titled Delivery Operations, Undelivered and Partially Delivered Routes.
Without objection, so ordered.
The report revealed issues with a lack of internal data collection and concluded that, quote, the actual number of undelivered and partially delivered routes is unknown, end quote. USPS agreed to improve on this by May 15th of next year. So, Ms. Hull, I do think this could be implemented earlier, needs to be. Could you share a little bit about how these target dates were chosen?
Yeah, initially, I think there was some disagreement with us on a recommendation that we made as it related to those undelivered routes. And so I think we went through what we call the audit resolution process, accelerated up the chain. We got to agreement, but it took a while to get there. And so I think that's why there was a delay in the actual implementation date. I do want to commit to you, though, that we're going to follow up on that once that action is taken, because clearly the Postal Service intends to deliver mail to every house every day. You've heard the Postmaster General express that today. And it's very concerning to us when deliveries are not made, when actual delivery points are not serviced in that way.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I look forward to meeting on cluster boxes. You know, to put it frankly, we don't want predominantly Black communities of lower socioeconomic status being asked to consider these cluster boxes when other communities that are built in a very similar way are not being asked to consider them either. So I look forward to talking about that, and I think this is definitely has room for oversight from your office as well. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Porter from California.
Good afternoon, Postmaster DeJoy. How many pieces of election mail did your agency handle this year?
About 99 million, 100 million.
99 million? Okay, and Republicans, Democrats, Independents, we are all seeing people use mail-in ballots, and they all deserve peace of mind that their ballots got delivered safely and quickly. What percentage of ballots did the Postal Service deliver within 3 days this election cycle?
From voters to, excuse me. Are you asking me from voters to election officials?
Yes.
Like 99.5%.
Yeah, so we have something like 97.7, so we're in agreement that it's a really, really high number. You did a terrific job. It's impressive. I will not say anything, well, I will go ahead and say the cringe thing, mission accomplished. But here's the fine print. The Postal Service, to do that, had to do a lot of extra work. So can you say more about what kind of extraordinary measures the Postal Service had to take to deal with that influx of election mail, ballot mail, and to get them delivered on time?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. I mean, basically, first to put it into perspective, we could be 99.5% on time and accurate. That still leaves that 0.5%, which could be 10,000 ballots, which is a huge issue in elections. So we, the last couple of days, 10 days before the election, we deploy extraordinary measures, which means a whole bunch of extra transportation between the plants. It means, inspections throughout our facility. We work very closely with the Inspector General's team that's out there, constant meetings and review of everything everything's going on. And then when we get down to the post office, we actually never send the mail back to the plant. So we did about 2.5 million ballots where it came into the post office, got delivered, we hand stamped it there, and then sent it right back out. So it was delivered within less than a day. That is very non-standard process. That's very expensive, and it's very nerve-wracking.
Yes. So what would make your job and the job of the hardworking people who work at the Postal Service, what would make it easier?
How about a standard ballot box?
Yes. Say it again for everybody in the back.
How about a standard ballot envelope with a barcode on it?
A standard ballot
up with
envelope.
that?
So one of the things those envelopes would have would be a USPS compliant barcode, which would make it easier and more quickly could scan all that. Having it clearly demarcated as a ballot, as official election mail, making sure the envelopes are not weird sizes, that the font isn't weird. All of those things slow down and add to the Postal Service burden. You have clearly are aware, Postmaster DeJoy, of my bill called the Vote by Mail Tracking Act. It passed out of this committee unanimously. It passed the House. It is now awaiting consideration in the Senate. And it's a bipartisan bill to make sure that all ballot envelopes meet these benchmarks. These design elements would really, really help make sure that we can get the election mail delivered efficiently and quickly. You support this bill?
Yes, we provided the technical assistance in the design of the envelope and so forth, and we would support it. We think it's
Yeah, so I really want to push the Senate to act on this bill in the remaining time. We do not need to put our Postal Service and let them, you guys are good for all weather, but we don't need you to weather this. There are over 8,000 different election officials doing different things with ballots and with envelopes. This would focus on the envelope while still allowing local ballots to be as they need to be. Senators need to hear from Americans that they want their ballots delivered quickly and that they stand with USPS in making it happen. So please let the senators hear you on this bill. In closing, Postmaster DeJoy, I just want to reinforce to you how strongly I support your efforts to make sure the U.S. Postal Police have the resources they need to keep our mail carriers safe as they're delivering more and more high-dollar packages and high-value packages, especially in the holiday season. I know that their safety is a top concern for you, so I want to encourage you to address that. I also would want to thank you and encourage you to continue to work on your efforts to deal with so-called porch pirates and package theft. I know this is something that requires a lot of adjustments, but I think the Postal Service is really the gold standard for that, and I'd like to have Congress act on my porch pirate acts to get your competitors up to that same level of safety for packages. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. I have been hearing over the last couple of years more complaints from constituents about issues with the Postal Service than probably any other issue. And the problem is significant, as I'm sure you know, because it's not just letters that are delivered by mail. It's critical documents, tax refunds, work permits, green cards, all sorts of immigration documents, and it's a significant problem. And I want to talk a little bit about that and see where we are. My office has worked on 100 cases, approximately 100 cases of lost or stolen mail that includes passports, work permits, green cards. We have 40 open or recently closed lost check cases that represents $3.8 million of stolen checks. We've been able to get about 700,000 back, but there are many checks that are stolen multiple times. I know this is a problem you are aware of, and I know that you're doing what you can, both on your side, Mr. DeJoy, and through the Inspector General's office. But I would point out that New York is ranked the highest out of any state in mail theft-related check fraud, and New York City is the worst metro for package theft in the United States, with $945 million in losses last year. Now, Ms. Hull, the Office of Inspector General does not regularly publicize the data on mail theft complaints submitted to the office. Can I get your commitment to audit my district, the 10th District of New York, and provide us with the information on where the investigations, any of the investigations have gone?
We can definitely work with you and your staff on what we're doing in your district already. If there's a need to do some more audit work, we'll work with you all on that. We have a number of complaints in New York and have worked, I think we have about 125 open investigations related to mail theft right now in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. So we do a lot of work in New York, and we're happy to talk further about that.
Thank you for that. I also sent a letter about 18 months ago in March of 2023 to you, Mr. DeJoy, urging the Postal Service to increase its attention on mail theft. I got a one-paragraph letter response from Government Relations, which referred my concerns to the Postal Inspection Service, and have heard nothing since that. Since you do also oversee the Postal Inspection Service, what more can I expect you to do on this issue?
When was the date of that letter, sir?
March 30th, 2023.
About that time, we rolled out Project Safe Delivery, which are a bunch of initiatives across the country, both in terms of visits into major cities like New York, where we team with local prosecutors and local police departments and do like a raid of the city to find mail-related theft, and that resulted in a lot of follow-on investigations and some arrests. We're implementing we have 80-year-old locks and keys. We're implementing new.
Yes, that's a whole nother issue.
We've gotten control over our key mechanisms. From the standpoint of, we used to have thousands of people control, and we're down to about 60 across the country, and we're instituting new locks, electronic smart locks, and then also dumb locks, which the digital mechanism is within the lock itself.
Yeah. I think all these efforts are important. I mean, the problem is that the problem is getting worse, not better, and I don't know many more details about the project that you're describing, but this is an ongoing problem. And with the Delivering for America, where the service is getting worse and costs are going up and more mail is being stolen, you put it all together and it's not a very good outlook. And I fully expect to hear back from you and to coordinate with my staff and you, Ms. Hull, to determine what is going on with this mail theft and what we can do to curtail it. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Budzinski from Illinois. Did I pronounce that right?
You did. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Raskin, for holding this important hearing and for giving me the opportunity to wave onto this committee for the hearing. I appreciate that. Postmaster General DeJoy and Inspector General Hull, thank you for being here and listening to the concerns that many of my colleagues are sharing regarding the recent proposed changes to the Postal Service. I represent Champaign and Springfield processing distribution centers in Illinois. Under your Delivering for America plan, both of these facilities would be downsized and consolidated into the St. Louis and Chicago distribution centers. This means my constituents' outgoing mail would have to travel hundreds of miles, additional miles, before even being sent out to their final destinations. With the current degree of service already substandard, these changes are just quite frankly unacceptable. This is even more concerning given the findings in Inspector General Hull's report following the implementation of these changes in Richmond, Virginia, which found that these changes, quote, contributed to a decrease in service performance for the Richmond region that continued 4 months after the launch. So my first question is to Postmaster General DeJoy. Can you promise my constituents in central Illinois that they will not see declines in on-time mail performance if there is a change in operation at the Champaign and Springfield distribution centers? And I'd really appreciate just a simple yes or no.
They will not experience what we experienced in Richmond. So
So no, they will not.
they will not experience what we experienced.
Additional delays. Okay, that's encouraging. Postmaster General DeJoy, the Champaign Processing and Distribution Center also employs over 200 career and pre-career postal employees, and the Springfield Processing and Distribution Center employs over 170 workers. According to the Mail Processing Facility Review, there's expected to be a net loss of over 100 employees at the Champaign Processing and Distribution Center and over 30 at the Springfield Processing and Distribution Center. How are you ensuring that all of these employees are provided with other employment opportunities, given that there will be no processing and distribution centers in central Illinois following these changes?
I don't, if you got that data out of a filing that we had, the intent of the plan, number one, is to also bring other type of if we in fact make that move for those particular locations, we will be also driving package delivery business into that location. So our intent is that people will have jobs in those particular areas. If we will work with attrition. We have a lot of attrition in the Postal Service, and we'll work through attrition. And I also got to go back. Some of these locations we are evaluating with regard to the new 3661 we just filed, and they may or may not be continuing in that direction. That was a big study we did to try and get our hands around where do we get savings from. But I could follow up with you on that if that is if one of the cases. The people are going to be okay.
Yeah, I think that is one of my bigger concerns is these employees and making sure that they can stay within their areas that they're working, and that is the true commitment that they have, that they don't have to be concerned about their employment situations.
We're very, very, I've been very, very committed to that since I walked in the door to make the right moves as we're making this transition so people feel secure in their jobs, which is why I converted a lot of people to full-time.
Okay. I also wanted to talk about Postmaster General DeJoy, your regional transportation optimization plan as well. As you know, if enacted, this plan would limit the number of times post offices located more than 50 miles away from a regional processing and distribution center have their outgoing mail picked up to just one time per day. The Postal Service has admitted that these changes will create up to 24 hours of additional delays for predominantly rural regions, and that's particularly the region that I represent in downstate Illinois. In the third quarter of the last fiscal year, on-time delivery rates for 3 to 5 day first-class mail in downstate Illinois was only 68%. Given that 1/3 of my constituents are already getting their mail late, how can you justify further delaying their mail simply because they don't live within a 50-mile area of a larger city?
Well, we need to reshape the Postal Service because we're losing a lot of money. There was 59 billion pieces of single-piece first-class mail in 1999. There's less than 12 now, and it's going down. What I will say in this plan, right now we have trucks going out in the morning empty and coming back empty, then going back at night empty and coming back empty. What we're proposing in this new plan for those further areas, we go out and deliver and pick up the mail at the same time. Then we will accelerate it through the system, right? 90% of the mail throughout the nation, especially on delivery going into these areas, will be accelerated. It's just the pickup of single-piece first-class mail that will be delayed tops 24 hours in so it's 2 day might go to 3 day, 3 day might go to 4 day, 4 day might go to 5 day, but nothing's going beyond the 5 days because we'll fly it or do something else. I think it's all these decisions are tough. Where do we get that we can stop tens of thousands of trucks running around empty throughout the nation by doing this? And then in some of these areas, like your area, where it's remote, but it's got population and has package business in and out. We articulate the worst of the situation. I think there's some other opportunities for those particular areas.
Yeah, and I know I'm out of time. I just want to say that these changes can't be made on the backs of rural America. And that is my very big concern, that the focus is on these urban cities, these big cities, at the detriment and at the loss of services for rural parts of our country. That's a very big concern. I yield back. Thank you.
All right, gentlelady's time's expired. That concludes all of our questions, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, for your testimony. Ranking Member Raskin and I are going to skip closing statements in lieu of votes being called a couple of minutes ago, but we had several members, I know Ms. Norton and Ms. Crockett, that had additional questions we're going to send to you. Ms. Hull, I know we have questions for you as well. As you can see, everyone cares about the Postal Service. We want to see the Postal Service be successful and efficient. So we'll be in touch with you, and I'm sure we'll have lots of more communication this next Congress. So,
Mr. Chair, could I just do a
Yes.
UC request?
Yes.
Let's see, several here. I ask unanimous consent to enter the record statement from Chuck Mullador, the Executive VP of the National Association of Postal Supervisors, a statement from Kevin Yoder at Keep Us Posted, and a statement from Marie Hobson Clark from the Envelope Manufacturers Association, providing comments on the status of the Postal Service.
Without objection to order.
And I'd like to ask UC to enter into the record a report from NDP Analytics dated March 24th titled...
Without objection to order.
And unanimous consent to enter in the record a submission from the U.S. Postal Service to the Postal Regulatory Commission, including the FY 2025 performance targets for each market-dominant product. And finally, a request to enter into the record this May 11th, 2022 letter from former Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney to Mr. DeJoy that she sent following the committee's April 4th hearing on the Postal Service's electric vehicle procurement, which highlights the Postal Service's original analysis of the costs and benefits of EVs, underestimated cost savings from EVs, and used outdated gas prices. The problem, yeah.
Without objection to order. With that, without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which we will have, and we will forward those to you all for your response. If there's no further business, without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
Thank you.